Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The wife wants to blame her husband, but for what and for what purpose? In today's installment, we'll find out. Enjoy the show! Tuesday, 12:13 p.m. Not knowing what to do with myself, I settled into Bud's office. I wasn't technically fired, but I was clearly not welcome in the office. Bill had to go back to his office after a meeting with Susie and Vicky. He said he would be difficult to reach most of the day, but that I could contact Janine if there was any new news. According to Tracy, Bud is now somewhere in Houston, following his hunch. I wish he would wait so I could go with him, but Tracy said he left early this morning. The worst thing is the feeling that my life is falling apart, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. I know I have good people who work for me, but I've always been a person who gets into things head over heels. This anticipation is driving me crazy. Even the report Tracy gave me from Bud didn't do much to help my irritation, since the audio and video recordings from my house the previous night showed nothing significant. It's been a rough day, and it's barely noon. In some ways, today is even worse than yesterday. At least I did something yesterday, even if I was running around the city like a headless chicken. I noticed that my attitude towards Susie and our marriage is gradually changing. It's becoming more and more difficult for me to understand how I can survive this. I'm still struggling with her betrayal on Friday night. Now I'm starting to get suspicious that she might be part of this conspiracy. If I find out that she is involved in this, then she will pay for it in full. I remember the morning meeting. As we were leaving, I asked Bill what he had done at the end of the meeting. In a way, it makes me angry. More precisely, it's more than anger. I'm not just angry, I'm jealous. He achieved his goal. He waited 10 years, but finally got his chance. The way I feel now, I don't want to wait anywhere near as long. I'm startled a little by a knock on the door, and I look up from the papers in Bud's office to see Tracy enter. "Bud's on the phone for you," she says. "Bud," I say into the phone, picking it up. Tracy smiles at me and leans across the table. Tracy smiles slightly and presses the glowing button on the front of the phone. Then I hear Bud talking to someone. Tracy then presses the speakerphone button, and Bud's voice now comes through the speaker. "Bud," I repeat. "What took so long, Tracy? Did you have to be taught how to use the phone?" "If only you knew how close you are to the truth," I laugh. Tracy smiles at me, finally straightening up and heading back to her desk, but not before adding a little fake hip sway along the way. "It's a pity I didn't go with you, Bud." "Yes, I can imagine, but you would only delay me. We've uncovered some important things here. But before I tell you, I want to make sure I have everything together. Can you arrange a meeting for Banner and me tomorrow morning?" "It might be hard in the morning, Bud. I have a meeting at my company where I have to give them my answer." Bill and I had almost no time to discuss the proposed package and set a time for tomorrow morning. "Damn," Bud grumbles. "Well, you'll need to hear what I found out before you go to this meeting, especially before meeting with your wife and her lawyer. Can you give me a hint about what you found out?" "I don't want to be mysterious, but until I'm sure, it's better to keep it a secret. We need to meet tonight. Find time for the three of you to meet and be late at that because you'll have a lot to do the rest of the day. You need to fly here to Houston immediately, urgently, right now. The sooner, the better. But first of all, make an appointment." "Okay, I'll do it. Here, I'll ask Tracy to book me a flight while I try to make an appointment for the evening. Do you think 9 o'clock is late enough? And where will I meet you when I arrive?" "Not until 9, I think. And no, you won't be meeting me in Houston. Better do it later, say at 10 in the evening. Make an appointment at my office in Dallas. While you're in Houston, you'll have your own assignment. We found your secretary. She's here, if you can believe it." "You're kidding." "Not at all. And I know you need to talk to her. So, write down this address and quickly come down here." I frantically write down the address Bud gives me. He reminds me to make an appointment again for the evening, and we say goodbye. I call Janine first as I head to Tracy's desk at the reception. Janine answers the first call, and I quickly tell her about Heidi's location. She immediately states that there's no way I will talk to Heidi alone. She tells me to book her a ticket along with mine and that she will meet me at the airport. I give Tracy my American Express card and ask her to find round-trip tickets for 2 to Houston, with us landing at Love Field around 9 p.m. While Tracy taps away at the keys, I return to my temporary office, pack my things, and prepare for the trip to the airport. When I return to her table, Tracy is just finishing up her reservation. I kiss her cheek as she hands me 2 e-tickets and an itinerary. I quickly call Janine to relay the flight information and arrange where we will meet at the airport. We'll both have to hurry to make it on time. As soon as I hang up, I remember that Bud told me twice not to forget. I manage to get Janine on the phone a second time and tell her that we need to arrange a meeting with Bill no earlier than 10 since our flight arrives at 9 p.m. She promises that someone will organize it. Tuesday, 3:49 p.m., Houston. Remember, Janine, I say quietly as we climb the steps. She's quite shy. I'll introduce you and explain why you're here. Just smile and nod, okay? She looks at me, smiling and nodding. This makes me laugh, one of the few times in the last 4 or 5 days. I look around the building where Bud says Heidi now lives. I shake my head and hope this is temporary for both of us. The front door wasn't guarded, so we just walked in and went up to the second floor. The corridor was at least clean but dimly lit. We walked down the corridor and soon stood in front of door 2011B. With a nervous sigh and a glance at Janine, I knock on the door. At first, I don't hear anything, but then I notice the slight sound of approaching footsteps. I see the peephole on the door close, and hear an "oh my god" from the other side. The door chain jingles, 2 bolts turn, and the door swings open to reveal a very surprised Heidi. After the last few days, I'm not at all sure how Heidi will feel about me. I watch her eyes fill with tears, and suddenly she crosses the threshold and surprises me with a very tight hug. Stepping back, she blushes, and the same old Heidi appears, smiling shyly. She notices my colleague. "I can't believe you're here, Mr. Vickers. I don't even know how you found me, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised," she says, not taking her eyes off Janine. I watch her glance at Janine's tight blouse and even tighter skirt. "Mr. Vickers?" she asks, with a slight hint of disapproval. "Heidi, you've been calling me Jake for 10 years. I see no reason why that should change now." A smile flickers on her lips, but she still casts a weary glance at Janine. Suddenly, I realize that if my suspicions are correct, then Heidi has no idea what's going on in Dallas, and she's wondering why I'm here with Janine. "Janine, this is Heidi Bias, my administrative assistant, but in reality, my right hand in conscience. Heidi, this is Janine Prescott, she's a paralegal." I wonder if I should explain more, but I decide that less is better. Heidi looks at us both with bewilderment, then steps back hesitantly and invites us inside. I've visited Heidi's house in Dallas several times, helping her with renovations and other things. I know most of her family lives here in Houston. In fact, my previous bad trip included some time in Houston, which is why Heidi accompanied me. Heidi leads us into a small living room and invites us to sit, asking if we would like something to drink. We both politely decline. "You are a difficult woman to find, Heidi," I joke with her. She looks at me, confused, then puzzled. "I'm so sorry that I left so suddenly. I wanted to stay at least until I found a worthy replacement for you, but I was told that there was no need to worry about it, and that the most important thing was to help my brother in Houston." I realized that Heidi just gave answers to several riddles, although I wasn't even sure what questions. "Heidi, are you okay?" I ask sincerely. "Are you in trouble?" She looks puzzled again. "Why, yes, I'm fine. I was more worried about you. I tried to call you this morning, but no one answered your phone. I tried to call Mr. Weston, but was told he was unavailable. Then I called the reception and asked to be connected to you, and they told me that you no longer work there. Mr. Vickers, are you in trouble? They told me it was something routine. You weren't fired because of me?" She casts another suspicious glance at Janine, who is sitting opposite me. Despite the seriousness of my situation, I can't help but notice, out of the corner of my eye, the long stretch of leg. I have to force myself to focus on Heidi. Suddenly, I find myself in a situation where I don't even know how to continue. I glance at Janine, but she just shrugs, not offering to help. Finally, I say, Heidi, just tell me what's going on. Janine and I came here to find you and make sure you are okay. Heidi looks at me with confusion and shoots another angry look at Janine, who simply smiles back. Didn't Miss Hinckley tell you what happened? I ask. She promised to explain why I had to leave so urgently. No, sit down and tell me. This is terrible, Jake. I knew this would happen, but it's still terrible. Calm down and tell me, I say. This is my brother Bumper, the one who constantly has problems. Yes, the same one. He did something stupid this time. Jake, he was caught buying pills, and this is the third time. The prosecutor said he would go to prison. You know Bumper wouldn't hurt a fly. Can you imagine what they'll do to him in prison? I ask, concerned. When did all this happen? I add. Last week, Heidi sniffed. Right after you left Houston. Yes, why didn't you call and tell me? She looks at me, puzzled. I didn't call because I knew you were working in San Antonio. I couldn't interrupt your workday with my little problems, Jake. As your boss and as a friend, I think I should have, I reply. So, what's the situation now? How can I help? I ask. Heidi, she says, sounding really puzzled, what? Don't you know what's going on? I answer, even more confused, what should I know? My attention is momentarily distracted by Janine. About my brother, stupid. You sent Miss Hinckley here to help me, Heidi says, irritation creeping into her voice, drawing my attention back from my thoughts about Janine's legs to Heidi's face. Out of the corner of my eye, I notice a sly smile appears on Janine's face. Has Miss Hinckley appeared? Did she help you? I ask, trying to focus. She didn't report to you? For a moment, I think about continuing this game and seeing where it leads. Then, I push the thought aside and decide to take the straight path, which usually works. Heidi, I didn't send Miss Hinckley here, so tell me what happened. Heidi looks at me in amazement and slowly sits up. I glance at Janine but quickly look away. I clear my throat and force myself to look at Heidi again. I thought she came to my house in Dallas because you sent her. I'm pretty sure that's what she said. Why don't you tell me what happened, Heidi? I repeat firmly. Over the next 20 minutes, Heidi tells me almost everything about Hinckley's visit. Heidi found out about her brother on Monday at work. She immediately went to Tom Weston, my boss, to ask for family leave. Tom, of course, approved her request, and Heidi agreed to leave for Houston on Tuesday evening. Heidi explains that while she was packing and taking care of last-minute chores, her doorbell rang. She was quite surprised to see Miss Hinckley, the executive director of human resources, on the doorstep. Heidi invited her in, and Hinckley began to express sympathy for Heidi's brother, saying that she, too, had a younger brother who got into this dirty pill business. As Heidi explains to me, Hinckley appears to have relatives in the Houston police and prosecutor's office. She offered to make some calls and intervene in the situation with Heidi's brother. Hinckley suggested she could get Heidi's brother sent to rehab instead of jail. I interrupt Heidi for a moment and ask, do you have any idea how Hinckley might have found out about Bumper? Heidi looks puzzled for a moment and then says, Mr. Weston must have told her. Out of the corner of my eye, I notice Janine writing something down on her PDA. I realize that she is keeping an eye on all the open questions. I return to Heidi and ask her to continue the story. Heidi was absolutely thrilled that her brother wouldn't go to jail. She enthusiastically agreed to Hinckley's plan. Hinckley kept her word, and her brother was indeed sent to rehab. Heidi had been in Houston since last Tuesday and planned to move here permanently to continue helping her brother. She had already contacted a real estate agent to sell her home in Dallas. I knew that Heidi's parents were divorced, her father's whereabouts were unknown, and her mother could usually be found with a bottle of vodka for company. So everything seems to be okay. I ask with slight suspicion, is everything really okay? What about the close relationship between Hinckley and Schmidt? I suddenly remember the old saying about Greeks bearing gifts, and as far as possible, I wonder if this is too good to be true. If the world were perfect, my brother wouldn't be addicted to pills. But the center to which he was sent seems very promising. I even had hopes that he would be able to quit. I smile sincerely, happy for her. She's been through several circles of hell because of her brother and her entire family during the time that I've known her. For a moment, I debate whether I should bring up signing the statement. Heidi already has enough worries in her life. So, you got the position of partner? Heidi suddenly asks, bringing my thoughts back to the main topic. No, Heidi, I answer. Everything except that. You didn't receive it? Heidi is surprised. Don't worry about it, Heidi. Everything will be decided when the time comes. But Miss Hinckley said it was practically a done deal when I saw her last week, Heidi continues. She said that. I answer in surprise, making a mistake again, glancing at Janine. She seems to have been waiting for this moment and spreads her knees even wider for a moment before crossing her legs again. In that brief moment, it becomes clear that she's not just teasing me. Yes, Jake, Heidi replies. She even asked me to sign a glowing statement about how much you've done for the company. Is it true? I repeat, even more surprised. With an effort, I turn my head toward Heidi. Did you sign the affidavit? No, it was not a statement under oath, Heidi responds. I've worked for you long enough to know the difference. It was just a report on the results of the work. She asked me to sign the second page and initial both pages. Was it 2 pages? I ask. Yes, well, the first page was a rave. The second page said something about your leadership skills and that this was an area for improvement, Heidi explains. I asked Miss Hinckley about this, and she said that all job reports are like that. They have to write something that isn't positive, no matter how well someone does. I look at Heidi for a second, trying to figure out what she's telling me. Did they forge your signature? I take the folder with a copy of the application out of my briefcase, carefully unfold it to the second page, and hand it to Heidi. Heidi, is this the second page you're talking about? Heidi frowns for a moment, then quickly reads the single paragraph. Yes, I think that's exactly what I signed last week, but I don't understand all this notarial text, she says, looking puzzled. The notary wasn't here last week, just me and Miss Hinckley. Before I can stop her, Heidi turns the first page. I stand up to try to take the document away before she can read it. Unfortunately, Heidi reads quickly and, in a couple of seconds, manages to stand up and turn away so that I cannot take the document back. Oh God, she exclaims, sighing. I sit down and let her read the entire statement. I glance over at Janine, who is now sitting quietly with her legs still crossed, watching the interaction between Heidi and me with great interest. Heidi slowly sits down on a nearby chair. I watch as her face begins to turn red, and she repeats the phrase, "Oh my God," in a whisper over and over again. She finishes reading the first page and turns to the second, as if she expected something completely different to be written on it. She looks at the document for a long time. H. How, why, Jake, she stutters. Calm down, I tell her. I had the same feelings when I saw it for the first time. What does this mean, Jake, she asks. That says that we had an affair, I answer carefully. It says that you made me have a night with you, that you made me do things like, well, you get the idea. Heidi covers her face with her hands and begins to sob. I'm going to get up and walk over to her, but with Janine here, I know I have to be careful. Heidi, I need to ask you a question to which I already know the answer. I knew the answer before I came here, but I have to ask this question. Did you sign this affidavit? No, she says very decisively. I signed your report on the results. You didn't sign this document? I repeat. No, she answers. But the second page looks familiar. Is this the page you signed? The first page is different. No, I mean, yes. The second page is the same, but the first page is a lie. A page of disgusting lies. I would never do anything like that. We've never done anything like this, and you would never do that to Sussy. Heidi, will you sign a legal statement saying that you did not sign this document in its current form? I ask. Certainly, she says, and there is already anger in her voice. What does all this mean, Jake? Are you having problems? Is Miss Hinckley behind all this? What does this mean for my brother? Oh God, what does this all mean? Everything will be okay, Heidi, I reassure her. Don't worry. You haven't done anything wrong, and you don't have any problems. It's important that you stay here in Houston and take care of your family and your brother. You don't have to worry about anything else. I'll take care of it, okay? Just keep me updated on what's going on in your life. Heidi sniffles and nods. But what about you, Jake? This is about intimate harassment. What did you force me to do? I smile to ease her fears. Don't worry about me, Heidi. Those who know me well know the truth. And your signature on the legal statement will greatly help in resolving any other problems. And Susie, does she know about this? She asks. I just nod. Oh God, how is she? This must be terrible. She doesn't think that you and I did anything? Susie is struggling a little with all of this, but don't worry. I know that she thinks of you just as warmly as she did before all this became known. So don't worry about anything. Surely she can't seriously think that you and I did something. It's just one page, and it's obviously fake. The problem is that you are so honest. Your signature on this document, even if it is fake, carries a lot of weight. Plus, there's also, I stop, not wanting to continue. What else, Jake? Heidi asks wearily. I sigh. There are photographs. Photos? How can there be photographs? We've never been together. I shrug. Do you have them? I look at Janine, trying to ignore her playful behavior. She smiles and shrugs. They're pretty nasty. I don't care what you think, Jake Vickers. I have the right to see these photos, she suddenly screams, standing up. I sigh and take another folder out of my briefcase. You better sit down, Heidi. Heidi sits up slowly, not taking her eyes off the folder. When she's completely seated, I hand it to her. She takes one last look at me and opens it. Oh God, she says quietly, and I watch as her face turns bright red. She studies each photo, repeating oh God each time, blushing more and more. She looks at all 8 photos, then finishes and puts them all back into the folder, handing it back to me. I understand how people can be deceived by these photographs, Heidi finally says. She looks up at me. But this is not us. It's not me. I don't have a tattoo. A tattoo? I exclaim, surprised. I open the folder and start flipping through the photos. Look at the last photo, Heidi says quietly. I scroll to the last photo and carefully scan every inch, but I see nothing. I'm about to ask Heidi where she saw the tattoo when suddenly I notice it. It's right in the middle of the back, just above the buttocks. The sheet that had partially covered her had slipped down and was gathered around her waist, but just above the sheet, I can see the outline of some kind of tattoo. Wow, I mutter under my breath. This could be important. Do you mind if we include in the statement that you don't have a tattoo? I ask. Heidi nods. Janine quickly creates a new application using the software on her laptop and prints it out using her small but efficient portable printer. Being a notary, she also notarizes the document. It seems incredible, but in just a few hours, we were able to uncover many suspicious circumstances and cast significant doubt on the idea that Heidi and I were in that bed. I get up to leave. I go up to Heidi and hug her. She hugs me back. Sorry, Jake, she says. I'm sorry too, Heidi, I answer. I give her one last hug, then Janine and I walk out the door. I wish her well and remind her to call me if any difficulties arise. I then add that I expect a couple of calls a week from her, no matter how things are going. She nods, sniffles, and Janine and I close the door behind us. We are silent the whole way to the car. We fasten our seatbelts and drive out of Heidi's driveway. Janine immediately reclines her seat a few inches. I can't help but look. My compliments to your hairdresser, I finally say with difficulty. Do you like it? She laughs. You know what? I'll think about it tonight in my hotel room, she says, then pauses. Do you think you would like to try your hand at this? In what manner? I ask, a little confused. Yes, she replies. You said you like the work of my hairdresser. Do you want to try being my hairdresser? I closed my eyes for a moment to compose myself. If this divorce takes place, if your divorce goes through, you won't be as interesting. She laughs, sitting up straight and pushing her knees together. And just to be clear, she continues, they call me the Ice Queen in the office. No one will believe a word you say if you decide to say anything. Suddenly, I feel completely alienated from this blonde black widow. I smile just for show. What won't they believe? I answer innocently. But I'll still ask you one question, I continue, looking at her. She tilts her head toward me but doesn't encourage me anymore. Why all the show? If you're the Ice Queen, then why this masquerade? And perhaps most importantly, why me? She laughs. Maybe because I can. I shake my head. This is not exactly an answer, but rather an evasion. Because you can? Do you always act like this? I'm really interested to know why tease, and why me? Yes, she replies with a grin and says nothing more. We are silent all the way to the airport until Janine speaks up. I was curious, she says. Curious? I repeat. In cases like yours, there is usually something to blame, she continues. Your wife would be unlikely to initiate a divorce based on the weak evidence we've seen so far. There must be something else in your past. From what I've seen, men can be divided into two categories. They are either cheaters or weaklings. So, I was curious to know if you were a cheater. I decided to test you. The cheater would have gotten me by now. I look at her. Is it true? I knew that we men are called the simple half, but I didn't think that we were so simple. I wait for an answer that doesn't come. I look at her again. So, because I didn't make a move toward you, you think I'm not the type to cheat? She looks at me and smiles slightly. I haven't decided yet, she says. I shake my head as I continue driving through the streets around the airport terminals. She basically just called me a wimp. A week ago, I would have laughed. Now, I'm just angry. Why is she so vindictive after what happened last Friday? Then I realized that she didn't know about last Friday. Bill said details of that night would not be shared with his staff unless necessary, so Janine is just a young, manipulative person, perhaps still trying to manipulate me. Suddenly, I decide that I just don't care. Despite her physical beauty and charm, I sense a lot of hidden emotional baggage that I have neither the desire nor the time to delve into. Once I reach the departure terminal, I pull over to the curb and park the car. Why don't you check in and I'll return the car and catch up with you later? I suggest. She looks at me, puzzled. Could I go with you to rent the car? There's no need for both of us to deal with the car or the bus. Plus, you have a big bag with all your equipment. You go ahead, and I'll catch up, I explain. She looks at me for a moment and shrugs. She seems to understand that all our games had just reached their logical conclusion. She opens the car door but then stops and turns to me, smiling. Her hand slides and rests on the inside of my thigh. You don't trust me, Jake? I turn and look her straight in the eyes without hesitation and without a hint of irony. I trust you with your life, I reply. She laughs and removes her hand. She opens the car door and gets out, looking back through the window. Jake, you still have a lot to learn. It wasn't about your life. I watch her enter the terminal. You bet, I think to myself, and thank God I have something to learn. It's not that I want to learn from you. Tuesday, 9:48 p.m. Janine and I arrive back in Dallas, Fort Worth and are immediately separated. I'm glad the flight from Houston was short, as barely a dozen words were said the entire time. I guess she didn't like the way I treated her in the terminal. I get the impression that few men do this to her. I pick up my car from the short-term parking lot and head to Bud's office, where Bill and I are to meet with him to discuss the latest discoveries and strategies. I pull up to Bud's office and notice Bill's car is already parked. I walk inside and I'm surprised to see Tracy still there. Have you been here all day? No, I left earlier because I knew I would have to return in the evening, she answers. Bud isn't here yet, but he called about 10 minutes ago and said he just got off the highway and would be here soon. Your lawyer is already here, she adds, nodding toward the conference room. I start to turn toward the conference room when the office door suddenly swings open, and Bud walks in with a big, smug smile. Thank you, Tracy, he tells her. Why don't you go home and tell your husband that I'll somehow compensate him for making you come so late? Tracy smiles and takes her purse, preparing to leave. The poor girl had kept her office open for us while she waited for her boss to return. I promise I will make it up to her, Bud says. She replies, yes, but Bud asks if my lawyer is here, and when she nods, he asks her to wait a minute so he can get us both into his office. She tells him she's already sent my lawyer to the conference room. He nods in appreciation, and Bud and I walk into the conference room. I introduce Bud to Bill. Bud asks us to make ourselves comfortable while he checks the results of some other parts of the investigation. We hear him talk to Tracy for a few minutes through the slightly open door, then thank her for staying late and wish her a safe trip home. He disappears for several long minutes and finally bursts into the conference room. Sorry to keep you both waiting, Bud says, moving around our chairs to get to the other side of the table. I wanted to get the latest reports from Tracy and my staff, he explains, taking his seat. Bud looks at my face and grins. Sorry, I know this isn't funny, but you look like you're about to explode. So let's get started. What do you say? I'm for it, I reply. I almost exploded. Bud laughs again. Okay, first let's take a look at their original application, which they claim was signed by your secretary. He takes out the original application and places it on the table. First of all, Jake, do you know anything about printers and the Secret Service? Secret Service? I ask again, confused. Yes. The Secret Service is part of the Treasury Department. Everyone knows they are directly responsible for protecting the president, but their original task was to protect the country's monetary system. When counterfeiting occurs, the Secret Service intervenes. What does the Secret Service have to do with Susie and me? I ask, a little worried. Nothing, except that they did us a great service. What do you mean? With the advent of computers, especially printers, copiers, and so on, it has become much easier to print out something that looks like a $20 bill. Of course, to successfully counterfeit a bill, you need to use the right paper and watermarks, but that's another story. But at first glance, you can print something that looks very authentic. The Secret Service convinced most, if not all, printer manufacturers to print a nearly invisible mark on every sheet of paper. Almost every color printer sold in this country prints an invisible, unique identification code on every sheet of paper. The mark only appears when ultraviolet light is used. Even if you somehow discover it, it won't tell you anything because it's a code. I'm starting to get excited. Are you saying that we can determine what printer these pages were printed on? More than that, son, he continues. Since printers are connected to computers, and all computers have a time concept, this invisible tag not only contains the printer's unique code, but also has a date and timestamp. If you identify the mark and know how to decipher it, you can determine not only what printer the sheet of paper was printed on, but also on what day and at what time. Actually, it's easy to see the mark, you just need the right light source. The tricky part is deciphering the tag. Unfortunately, each printer manufacturer has developed its own code, but luckily for us, I know a guy who has these codes, and I showed him your application. What did he find? Bill asks. Before I can respond, Bud adds, both pages were printed on the same printer. Oh, I say, hoping to hear something different. But they were printed at different times, he adds with a smile. At different times? I repeat. Yes. Both pages were printed on January 17th. The second page was printed first at 7:03 a.m. The first page was printed 15 hours later, at 10:13 p.m. How is this possible? I ask, stunned. That's the day Heidi said she signed the statement, but she also said she left for Houston that afternoon. She was on the plane when the first page was printed. She couldn't have put her initials on it. Exactly, Jake, Bud says. But then how did her initials end up there? Obviously, Heidi didn't put them there. In truth, it was not a very good attempt to forge a document. The second page was printed on a laser printer using toner. Heidi's initials look real and are ink. We could even figure out which pen was used based on ink analysis, but that would be redundant. The important thing is that Heidi's initials on the first page are made with printer toner. Oh my God, I mutter, realizing that this completely refutes the original statement. Okay, I understand the difference between toner and ink, but I'm curious. If the initials on the first page were created by the printer, do they exactly match the initials on the second page? You're on the right track, boy. You're smart. Even though your dad nags about you, Bud chuckles. We checked it out, and the two sets of initials don't match exactly. We have no evidence of exactly how this was done, but it can be assumed that Heidi's signature was scanned from the first original page and then digitally altered before being transferred to the fake first page. This first page was then printed later. I think I would feel better if the two sets of initials matched, but at least now we have proof that this is all a setup, I mutter. One more thing, Jake, Bud adds. I can do a lot because I know a lot of people. I always exchange favors. Bill laughs. And who did you exchange favors with, Bud? Bud looks at Bill with a grin. I will never tell you this, but I know that Jake's company leases the 14th and 15th floors of a building in downtown Dallas, and I also know that the entire building's security is outsourced, and access to all offices requires a security badge. Don't tell me, I smile. Yes, a friend of a friend just printed out a badge access log for the 2 floors rented by your company from January 17th to midnight on the 18th, Bud says. And I ask, not wanting to be in the dark any longer. See for yourself, he chuckles, handing the printout onto the table. Bill looks over my shoulder with equal interest, and I quickly scan the report. I'm particularly interested in early morning access. The log notes several badges used during the early morning hours, likely by security or technical support personnel. But 2 entrances catch my attention. At 6:23 a.m., 2 badges were used on the 15th floor within seconds of each other. I look up at Bud, disappointment visible on my face. Okay, we have 2 interesting badge numbers, but who do they belong to? A little faith, Jake, he says, taking a second printout from the same folder and placing it on the table between Bill and me. I laugh. You're enjoying stretching this out too much. Bill takes the second printout, which appears to list all the badge numbers of every employee in the building. Looking over each other's shoulders, we scan Bill's list to find the 2 numbers that appeared at 6:23 on my list. I found it, he says. Evelyn J. Hinley. Damn her, I mutter. I tell Bill the second number and watch him turn a few pages. Timothy K. Schmidt, he says. I slowly lean back in my chair. I'll kill this stupid. I look up and see Bud looking at me intently. He glances at Bill. Jake, I see what you're thinking, and I think your lawyer understands it too. I can tell you from personal experience that you shouldn't go to jail because of a woman, he says. He looks at Bill again and continues, someday I'll tell you a personal story. So don't stress yourself out, and don't make plans. You still have a tough road ahead of you, and you don't need criminal charges on top of what you already have. I consider Bud's words and nod, straightening up. But in the back of my mind, there's a thought, he's right. Jake, we have more evidence to look at, so let's not focus on just one, Bud continues. We've already found a few inconsistencies in this affidavit, but as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So let's take a closer look at these photos. I assign them to someone I trust to check them. First, we can say with great confidence that the photographs have not been faked. Whoever made them used regular 35mm film, not a digital camera. With digital photos, you can always tell they're fake, whether they are or not. But it is much more difficult to make invisible retouching of negatives. I don't know if they did this on purpose, but they ended up with almost irrefutable evidence. Sorry, Jake, but the photos are real, and I have to believe that it's you in the lead role. Bud looks at me for a few seconds before continuing. Now, like I said, we suspected that the photos were staged, and we can prove it with little clues here and there. First, we know that someone else took these photos. The only way one of the 2 people in the photo could control the camera is with a remote control and a tripod. My expert zoomed in on some of the photos, focusing on the objects on the nightstand. The first 3 pictures were taken from almost the same position, and the clock shows that they were all taken at 1:30 a.m. What's interesting is that your pose, Jake, is the same in all 3 photos. But in the 4th photo, the situation becomes a little more interesting. The time has changed to 1:31 a.m., and this is the only photo that shows any movement on your part. In the remaining 4 photos, your pose is identical to the one in the 4th. Apart from my wife, I add. It is highly suspicious that someone barely moves during intimate. There is another interesting detail in the 4th photo, Bud continues. The expert who looked at the pictures believes the camera moved a full foot to the left. How did you find out? Asks Bill. It's the calendar and the clock on the nightstand, Bud replies. He takes 2 more photographs out of the folder, looks at them for a moment, and places them on the table for Bill and me to look at. Pointing to the first new photo, Bud continues, this is a close-up of the nightstand from the 3rd photo, from the camera's perspective. Notice that the calendar is in front and to the right of the clock. The leftmost edge of the calendar overlaps the right edge of the clock. Now, look at the same view in the 4th photo. We watch for a few seconds and immediately see what Bud is pointing at. The enlarged view of the 4th photograph shows the slight distance between the calendar and the clock. I see it, I say. This gap could only have occurred if the clock, calendar, or camera had moved. And it's safe to say that the clock or calendar did not move. That's right, says Bud. As I said, my expert was even able to determine that the camera had moved about a foot to the left. I gave him your height, and he made some guesses about the distance between your waist and the top of your head. Using this as a basis, he calculated that the camera was approximately 9 feet from the subject. Once he knew this, he was able to use geometry to determine how much the camera had moved. Great job, Bud, exclaims Bill. We have now proven that there was at least one other person in the room. Oh, we're just getting started, Bill. I had a very fruitful trip to Houston, Bud laughs. What else? I ask impatiently. Bud laughs again. Calm down, guy. Do you have a date today? Or Bud suddenly stops mid-sentence. Sorry, Jake. It somehow fell through before I could think about it. I shake my head and gesture that everything is fine and that he should continue. Blushing, Bud says, I spent most of my time in Houston at the hotel you stayed at, Jake. I asked around and found out the name of the bellhop who had worked there the longest. If you want to know what's going on at the hotel, talk to the bellhops or cleaners. I found one young guy who had been working there for a few years, and all it took was a picture of Grant for him to start talking nonstop. The first thing I showed him was one of these photographs and asked him about the calendar. He said they don't use anything like that in the rooms. The only way the calendar could appear in the room is if it was brought in by a client. Then this bellhop starts playing detective and notices the water bottle in the photo. I asked him how he knew this. He said the hotel had an exclusive deal with the Ice Mountain brand, and the water was Aquafina. So, Jake, I have a question for you. Did you bring water to your room? No, I don't think so, I answer, trying to remember. I definitely didn't leave the hotel to buy water and bring it back. You know I have a low alcohol tolerance and I often just drink water. While I was there, I only drank what was in the lobby or in the minibar of my room. You told me on Monday that you and a few other guys were celebrating on Saturday night. What were you drinking then? I drank iced tea for dinner. After that, I had 1 beer, and then water. Wait, I just remembered something. We bought several rounds of drinks. Of course, I was on a cheap date because by that time, I was only drinking water. I remember Schmidt buying the last round. He said he needed to go to the bathroom, so he brought the drinks himself. I didn't need more water, but he brought me a bottle anyway, and I actually drank it. In fact, I now remember that I took this bottle, half full, with me to my room. Suddenly, I started to feel very tired and went to my room. I remember almost nothing after that until the next morning. I look at Bud. Why are you smiling? I ask him. Well, what you just said matches what I found out, Bud replies. Do you have anything else? Asks Bill. Oh yes, and something important, Bud says. I told you I became friends with that bellhop. I asked him to do something for me. It cost me Franklin this time, but it was worth it. Well, what is this? I ask. When I first entered the hotel, I noticed the security cameras. I asked the bellhop if there were cameras only in the lobby or if they were everywhere. He said cameras are only installed at the front desk and in the main hallways of each floor, near the elevators. I asked if he could find out what room you stayed in and if there was floor footage available for the evening of January 15th. Then I had to get Franklin, but like I said, it was worth it. Bud takes a VHS tape out of his bag. My eyes widen as I see him stand up and walk toward the TV in the corner of the room. I've already looked at it several times and even worked on some of it, so it's already rewound to about the right place. Bud presses play, and the image appears on the screen. It shows a view of the corridor. 2 elevator doors are visible in the left foreground. To the right is a kiosk and an old-fashioned cigarette but been converted into a trash bin. In the distance is a long corridor with an endless series of room doors. The top right corner displays the date and time. It is now January 15th, 1:23 a.m. In the lower right corner, it says 18. A few seconds after the image appears, we see the elevator in the far left corner of the screen open. We don't see what's happening inside, but soon 2 figures appear and begin to walk down the corridor, moving away from us. Both are wearing coats, and the larger one has a hat on his head. Judging by the size and gait, this is a man. The other figure is clearly recognizable by her medium-length hair, reaching the middle of her back. This is the woman from the photographs. We watch them walk down the corridor. Bud comments that he went and counted the number of doors between the elevator and my hotel room. They stopped right in front of my room, he says. As the 3 of us watch, we see the man in the coat take out a key card, open my door, and disappear into my room. Damn it! I exclaim. This proves that someone entered my room right before the photos were taken. You did it, Bud, Bill says. Not so fast, Bill adds. I agree, this seems like the final nail in the coffin, but the 2 naysayers I heard this morning won't see it the same way. What do you mean? I ask. Obviously, this is the woman from the photographs, but the man in the photographs could be you. He was your height. They will claim that this is proof of your betrayal. After all, no one but you is supposed to have your key card. Damn, you're right, I exclaim. Not so fast, Kimosabe, Bud laughs. I haven't shown you everything yet. First of all, this is not the only recording I got. I got all the footage from Jake's floor that evening. I have a clear recording of Jake going into his room an hour and a half earlier and not coming out until the morning. Secondly, as I said, I used several connections. As soon as I saw this footage, I ran to another video expert I know in Houston and asked him to take a look. At first, when my expert watched the footage several times, he said it was unlikely that we would be able to see anything on these 2 people since they seemed to be aware of the camera and turned their faces as soon as they approached its field of view. Bud takes out another folder from his magic bag. This time, he pulls out one photograph. It's an enlarged image of an ashtray. Right on the edge of the chrome ashtray, we see the elevator doors open and 2 people standing there. Damn, I say, we can almost see them. Wait, Bud says, it's an increase. Bud takes out another photo and places it on the table. Bill and I both look at it and then at each other. Is this Schmidt? Asks Bill. I look at the magnification again. Although it's grainy and somewhat distorted due to the curvature of the chrome, we can clearly see the 2 elevator doors in the shape of parentheses. Between these 2 curved elevator doors, 2 faces can be distinguished. One belongs to the woman in my photographs, the other belongs to the vice president of sales of my company, Thomas K. Schmidt himself. I whistle. That's not all, Bud says happily. I asked the bellhop to get the security logs for your floor from that evening. It turns out they indicate that your room was opened by someone from maintenance at 1:23 a.m. I found this guy, and he didn't admit anything except that he lost his card somewhere that night. He didn't notice it until around 4 a.m. or so. I'll bet you $1 to a donut that he took the bribe. After all, that's how I got all my information. Bud raises his hand when I try to speak. One more thing, Jake, and then I'll finish. The messenger even recognized this woman from your photographs. She is a high-class girl of easy virtue. He called her by name, and I even found her. She didn't answer many questions, but she said she was hired as a joke. She just pretended to have an intimate with you, but she didn't. She laughed and said they didn't even bother to take your pants off. Of course, she refused to be written down or sign any documents. Bud smiles and throws the audio cassette on the table. But as luck would have it, my tape recorder was accidentally turned on, so I screwed up and recorded it anyway. It won't be admissible as evidence in court, but it may carry some weight with a particular prosecutor. Bud throws the last photo on the table, and we look at it. Here she is, Jake. Here's your mysterious girlfriend. I lean back and laugh, more out of relief than for any other reason. It's a deep laugh, the one I've needed for days. I look at my watch and see that it's barely 10:30 p.m. I quickly call Vicky Gambino. She doesn't answer, but I leave a message asking to meet her and Susie tomorrow. We have the final piece of evidence for Susie, and if it doesn't convince her of my innocence, then I won't fight her divorce suit. Both Bill and Bud remain silent while I make the call. Bill puts his hand on my shoulder. I smile, and the two of us begin to discuss strategy for the next day. Bud gets up and makes fresh coffee, and over the next hour, we discuss a few ideas. Just as we're about to leave for the evening, my cell phone rings. It's Gambino. Bud's phone also rings at the same moment, so I get up and leave. Vicky says she received my message and spoke to Susie. They will meet us at Susie's office tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. After finishing the call, I return to the conference room and tell Bill, game on. Bill and I quietly discuss strategy for the next day while Bud finishes his call with a few grunts. Finally, he ends the call and sits quietly, too quietly. Is something wrong, Bud? I ask. I'm not sure yet, he answers gruffly. I still have a couple of things to do. I'll let you know when the time comes. Bill and I exchange puzzled looks. Bud looks a little depressed. Even though he just solved the case, he appears to be hiding something. But it may have something to do with another agency matter. It's hard to imagine what could go wrong in our case that could cloud what was revealed today. With Bud feeling this way, Bill and I silently agree that it's time to disband our little band. After shaking hands, Bill and I head outside, say a few last words, and then go our separate ways. I return to my hotel, open the minibar, and take a cold beer to the balcony. I take a deep breath and begin to reflect on the last few days. Life has been a real ride and a whirlwind since Friday. For perhaps the first time, I'm starting to think seriously about what happened on Friday night. My mind was in turmoil. I was so mad that night, but now I see how Schmidt set it all up. Looking back, it's easy to see how Susie came to her conclusions. But couldn't she have just talked to me about it instead of humiliating me and literally sending me to the hospital? Her reaction was fast and deadly, but she always was. I knew that even before our wedding. I still feel a lot of anger toward her for not even giving me a chance to talk about it. And then there's the whole question of how she slept with that man right in front of me, even knowing how ruthless she can be. The level of deception to lure me into this chair and then the betrayal. Can we get through this? I know in my heart that I love her. This is not a question. And strangely, it's not even a question of trust. This was an isolated incident that she committed in retaliation. She was reacting to her own rage, and once she learned the truth, she would be horrified. I head back inside the hotel room for a moment to grab a second beer before heading out onto the balcony again. Sitting heavily in my chair, I sigh, knowing that I want to somehow fix everything but not knowing how to put all the pieces together. I look out at the lights of Dallas while I sip my beer. I want to get drunk, but I know I need to be fully conscious for my meeting with Susie tomorrow. Halfway through my beer, my cell phone rings. I quickly check and see it's Bud. Bud speaks briefly and informs me that a package is waiting for me at the front desk of my hotel. No later than 7 p.m., he says. The package will contain several items marked for Banner's eyes only. He makes me promise to give it only to Banner and not look into the folders that are marked. Reluctantly, I make a promise to him that I won't look, but not without arguing with him for a few minutes. Bud, as always, says little while I argue with him. His only answer is that there is a time and place for everything. Now is not the time. I grumble in response, and Bud makes me promise again not to look in the files. After talking with Bud, I try to remember what I heard in his office to understand why he is so rude. I shake my head, realizing that Bud said very little even then. I feel a sense of foreboding when I call Bill to tell him about the package. Bill is as puzzled as I am and suggests we meet at the same little cafe no later than 7:45, so he can see what Bud put in the package. Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. To say I didn't sleep well last night is an understatement. The only thing harder than sleeping last night was resisting the temptation to look at the package that was waiting for me at the hotel reception, seeing all the contents with Bill's name on them. Somehow, I was able to resist checking them out. The only reason I was able to hold off was because I gave my word to an old friend like Bud. Bill has just joined me at a table in the corner. First, I push the coffee I bought for him toward him, and then I hand him the package from Bud. He lifts the lid of the box and frowns for a moment, takes out 2 folders, and then stands and takes a few steps away. He looks through both folders while I take the recorder out of my jacket pocket. It's also tagged for Bill, but I kind of broke my promise to Bud. I promised not to look in the folders. I didn't say anything about not listening to the audio recording. I look at the recorder, desperately trying to contain the anger that threatens to burst out, anger at Susie, if not pure hatred for that idiot Schmidt. Only the desperation in my heart helps keep this anger at bay. Bill returns to our table and asks if I'm ready to go to Susie's office. I ask him to wait a minute, and then I explain to him about the tape and what I heard on it. He places a comforting hand on my shoulder, and we discuss how we could use this information. Our mood has changed dramatically compared to last evening. Gloomily, we gather our materials and begin to walk toward my wife's office. Both women have an expectant look on their faces as we enter. Silently, I watch as the expression of expectation gives way to bewilderment on both of them. I understand that they expected us to attack. Instead, we walked in like undertakers, ready to bury the dead. Bill takes out the affidavit that Janine signed yesterday from his briefcase and gives copies to Susie and Vicky. "What is this?" asks Susie. "I suggest you read it," Bill says. The document speaks for itself. "Where's the original?" Susie asks. "We have it. We plan to return it today before we leave," Bill replies. Both quickly scan the document with their eyes and look at each other. "Did you meet Heidi before she signed this?" Susie asks me. "Yes, I have," Bill answers for me while I remain silent. I feel anger bubbling beneath the surface. I don't trust myself to speak. "Then I agree with your lawyer. This document really speaks for itself," says Susie. "It says that Heidi, when confronted by Jake, would sign anything." "What?" I shout. Bill's hand immediately and firmly squeezes my forearm, stopping any words I was about to say. "Of course she'll sign it, Jake. She was your secretary for many years. She's been your lover for who knows how long. You intimidated her and basically forced her to sign this new affidavit. Have you completely lost your mind?" I answer in amazement. "You are completely ignoring everything you know about Heidi and me over the past 8 years. You cheated on me," Susie replies. "I have no idea who you are now." "After last Friday, I can say the same thing," I hiss, forgetting my promise to let Bill do the talking. His reminder is to squeeze my forearm even tighter. At least this time, Susie has to look away, but only for a moment. When she looks into my eyes again, a prosecutor's mask appears on her face. Bill takes out another document from his briefcase. "This is a copy of the original document you gave my client," Bill says, handing them copies of the original affidavit. "We would like to know if you've noticed a strikingly different tone between the first and second pages of the affidavit that you believe to be truthful. Did you notice that the first page is a harassment complaint and the second page accuses my client of lacking leadership skills, as if it were a performance evaluation? The 2 pages don't match." "This is an opinion shared only by you and your client," replies Vicky Gambino. "Susie," I exclaim, forgetting my promise again. "Heidi told me she never saw that first page. She says the original first page was my job description. She says she signed the second page and was told to initial both pages. She says there was no notary. Of course she'll say that, Jake. You forced her to cover your 5th place. Did anyone notice that this woman signed 2 completely different affidavits? Doesn't that speak volumes about her character? You know very well what kind of character Heidi has, I challenge. That's what I wanted to hear, Susie says, her voice dripping with disdain. My husband is defending his mistress against his wife. I look at her, stunned. Whose cow would moo? I simply answer, but at the same time, I see her resolve weakening a little. She knows I'm telling the truth about Heidi's character. She may have lost faith in me, but not in Heidi. Why didn't Heidi say anything about this before? Susie challenges. Heidi's brother started taking pills again and was arrested. Heidi went to Houston to help her family deal with the situation, I reply. I wonder if you dare to guess who actually got the signature on this document, Bill asks, waving a copy of the first affidavit. None of them rise to Bill's bait. The executive director of human resources, Miss Hinley, personally came to Heidi's home to obtain her signature just hours before Heidi flew to Houston. Hinley offered to help Heidi with her brother's problem. She told Heidi not to worry about how much time she would need in Houston and that she could take as much time as she needed. Hinley even said that my client personally sent her to Heidi with instructions not to worry about the family vacation. Jake didn't send Miss Hinley on this trip. Why would the HR executive go so far beyond her scope to help Jake's former secretary without even telling him? Why didn't she send one of the several HR people who work under her? And not to mention, Jake didn't even know about Heidi's brother's problems until yesterday. As far as we know, Miss Hinley is a close friend and professional ally of Mr. Schmidt, with whom you recently began working together, if I'm not mistaken. Susie glances at me when she hears the mention of her and Schmidt. For a moment, her face turns pale, but almost immediately, the prosecutor's mask descends on her again. She theatrically raises her hands. None of these arguments matter, she says. The photographs themselves incriminate you. Even if they don't have Heidi in them, it's obvious you, someone. I'm not divorcing Heidi. I'm divorcing you, I reply. Bill's hand squeezes my forearm again, warning me. Bill looks at Vicky and says, as we understand from yesterday's meeting, there were 2 and only 2 counts that resulted in the divorce suit. While both are quite serious on their own, together they create an irresistible case. We have already questioned the first charge, the affidavit. We have even more information that will completely dispel any remaining doubts about the original affidavit and prove that it was forged. The second accusation is the photographs, about which we also raised serious doubts. Wouldn't it be wise for everyone to cool down, take a step back, and get the facts straight before moving on? The original affidavit has not been proven false, says Vicky Gambino. As everyone knows, Miss Bevis is in these photographs and she is now trying to cover for her boss. After she accused him, she had doubts and didn't want to bite the hand that would feed her in the future. Nothing has proven that the original document is not valid. Bill looks at me and I subtly shake my head, letting him know I shouldn't reveal the tattoo just yet. None of them appear to be susceptible, as already stated. We have evidence that will dispel any doubt about the original affidavit. We just need time and opportunity to present it. I really doubt it, and I'm getting tired of this whole show, interjects Susie. Jake, believe me, I seriously looked at the evidence. It made me sick. Then I asked experts to study it, and they confirmed it. This show you and your lawyer are putting on only makes you look even more desperate and pathetic. Desperate and pathetic? I counter. Coming to the conclusions that you made proves one thing, that you were unable to look at the situation objectively and did not take into account all the facts. Clearly, you have completely ignored any character issues. After you see what we show you this morning, I'm sure you'll look at it completely differently. What we show will completely destroy the 2 pieces of evidence you plan to use against me. I'm literally gritting my teeth to keep myself from commenting further about last Friday. Like Bud said, now is not the time or place, at least not at the moment. Deep down, I wonder why I'm even sitting here. Jake, this is not a game, Susie says. It's not something you have to win at any cost, even if you have to make something up. And suddenly, I understand why I'm still sitting here, trying to prove my innocence. Everything we show can be easily verified or has already been verified. But you're right about something, this is not a game. But this is something I have to win. You accused me of something extremely offensive, something I would never do. You questioned my dignity and my character, and you punished me severely, both emotionally and physically, for something I never did. Even if you refuse to see the truth, what we've done over the past few days to completely refute all your accusations is important to me. It's up to you to decide if it's important to you and perhaps to us. Thank you for those brilliant points, lawyer, Susie replies sarcastically. I smile back at her, mainly because I know it pisses her off when she tries to get under my skin, and I just smile back to prevent the conversation from getting worse. Bill interjects, have you heard anything about using invisible codes on printers that the Secret Service requires manufacturers to print on every sheet of paper? No wonder Susie knows about this. However, Vicky Gambino has never heard of it. I sit back and drink my coffee while Susie explains the case to her lawyer in her usual concise and efficient manner. So, what about these invisible codes? Asks Vicky. Are you aware that 2 pages of the so-called original affidavit you gave me on Monday were printed at different times on the same day? Bill asks. Isn't that logical? Vicky responds. The pages should come out of the printer at close intervals. Yes, that makes sense, Bill replies. But not in this case. In this case, the second page was printed at 7:03 a.m. The first page was printed 15 hours later, at 10:13 p.m. This page was printed after the affidavit was signed by Heidi and supposedly notarized. It was printed just a few hours after Heidi boarded a plane to Houston. If Heidi was in Houston, how could her initials appear on this page? I watch as Susie straightens up and narrows her eyes suspiciously. Can you prove it? You can prove it yourself, Bill says. Your employees have even more experience than we do. This is something that could have been done easily. Bill takes a folder out of his briefcase and flips through several files until he finds the one he needs. Here you go. He throws the folder on the table. This is the same folder and the same original so-called affidavit that you gave me on Monday. Let your experts check it. Susie takes the folder from the table and opens it, checking the contents. I'll check, she replies emotionlessly. So, if they were printed at different times, that doesn't prove anything, as you claim. Perhaps there was an error in the text and they simply reprinted the first page, says Vicky. Miss Gambino, Bill quickly interjects, I'm sure you understand that this would never be done with a document that was supposedly notarized. But more importantly, if they did reprint the first page, how do you explain Heidi's initials on it? Let me remind you, by that time, Heidi was already in Houston. What's more, I add, Heidi's initials on the first page are not written in ink, but printed in toner. The same toner was used to print the first page. This fact is confirmed by Heidi's new statement, in which she says she never saw or signed this page. I think we have sufficiently proven that at least the first page of the affidavit you submitted is a forgery. Not only was it not signed by Heidi Bevis, but she had never actually seen the page until it was introduced to her this week by Jake. Bill adds, without admitting anything, the look on Susie and Gambino's faces tells me everything I need to know. They realized that this affidavit was forged. I hope you understand, Bill adds, that the fact that the affidavit was falsified also indicates malice. I hope you're not implying that my client forged this affidavit or did anything with the intent to harm, Vicky says quickly. I think it's clear that your client has done some pretty malicious things, I add hotly. Bill's hand squeezes my forearm again, silencing me. We are not alleging that your client participated in the forgery of the affidavit. We even have evidence of who did it. It's a shame your client didn't do enough research to discover this information on her own. It only took us a few hours with far fewer resources to discover this once we had the document, but we suspected it was fake from the very beginning, while your client had no doubt. Bill raises his hand to stop Gambino's objection. We want to move on to other information that we want to present to you. Again, he reaches into his briefcase and pulls out another folder. Opening it, he hands over 2 copies of the pass logs for the day on which the affidavit was printed. We have already highlighted important information about when access was gained to the floor and also noted who owned these passes, Bill explains. He specifically points out that at the time the second page was printed at 7:03 a.m., the access logs show that there were only 2 people on the floor. Bill pauses to let both women determine for themselves that the 2 people were Hinley and Schmidt. Unable to contain myself, I say, I know who gave you this affidavit, Susie, and I also know that you know that he and I have been rivals for many years. You knew that he had been sharpening his grudge against me for a long time. You should have thought about this from the very beginning. He set me up, and you supported him. I stare at Susie, and for the first time, she can't meet my gaze and looks away. Bill says, "Now, let's move on to what is, of course, the more damaging evidence, the photographs." Yesterday, we discussed the very short period of time during which the photographs were taken. We also discussed how my client had not moved during this time. "So you admit that it's you in the photo?" Susie asks me directly. "Yes, unfortunately," I answer. "So even if it's not Heidi, you still cheated on me with a woman who looks like Heidi?" "Maybe you even fantasized that it was Heidi," Susie challenges. "Do you really think so little of me that you have to invent my shortcomings?" I answer hotly. I pull myself together and continue, "Yes, that's me in the photo, and no, it's not Heidi. If you look closely at this last photo, you can see the top of the tattoo at the very base of her back. Heidi, as you can guess, Susie, has no tattoos. I'm convinced it's not Heidi," I add. "Jake, Heidi is not a problem," Susie says, angry again. "The problem is you." "I wish we could be given the opportunity to present our findings without being challenged at every turn," says Bill. Susie looks at Vicky and then back at me. "No," she answers simply. "Okay," says Bill. "This will only slow down our presentation but will not change it. First of all, the reason Jake didn't move in the photos is because he was poisoned." "Poisoned?" Susie exclaims. "How do you know this, and why didn't you report this on Monday?" "I'll come back to this later. I'll continue now. Secondly, these photographs were staged. We have already agreed on the clock and calendar." "No, we didn't agree," Susie challenges again. "You discussed it, and we rejected it. Nothing was agreed upon. First of all, do you really think my client is stupid enough to allow himself to be photographed cheating? Secondly, we have already proven that one of your two main pieces of evidence was maliciously tampered with. We know that a lot of effort was put into making a false affidavit. Don't you think this raises doubts about the photographs? Those behind the affidavit would not go so far as to fabricate photographs with great effort." "I will refrain from commenting on how stupid your client may be," Bill replies, "and regarding the clock and calendar, there could be several reasons why they are located the way they are." "What about a water bottle?" he asks. "A water bottle? And what's wrong with her? Are you saying that the hotel does not sell or provide water?" Vicky asks. "This hotel has an exclusive contract with the Mountain Ice brand. They don't provide any other water. They don't sell it in vending machines or serve it in cafeterias or through room service. If you look closely, the bottle indicates that this is the Aquafina brand. It's clearly out of place here," Bill explains. "You could have brought that bottle yourself," Vicky remarks. "That's right, and he brought it. But Mr. Schmidt gave it to him," Bill replies. "How convenient. Is it all Schmidt's fault?" Susie asks defiantly. "Is it his fault that you cheated?" "No, he's not the only one to blame for this whole situation," I say. "Part of the blame lies with you," I hissed, "and I didn't cheat this time." Bill just looks at me, and I return to my seat, seething with rage. "We have a witness. Mr. Weston was with Jake and Mr. Schmidt. We haven't had a chance to interview Mr. Weston yet, but we're confident that when we do, he'll be able to confirm that Schmidt returned with the latest round of drinks and a bottle of water for Jake. This happened about 15 minutes before Jake started feeling sleepy. At that moment, he said goodbye to Weston and Schmidt and went to his room alone, I might add." I smile as I see Susie begin to look down at her hands. She always did this when she was stressed or felt that a situation was slipping out of her control. "Have you seen desk calendars like these in hotels?" Bill asks. Susie looks up. "I'm not the one who should answer questions." "I'll take your non-answer as an admission that you didn't see such calendars at the hotel," Bill replies. "Or did you see it?" "No," she answers decisively. "Do you want to know who has such a calendar on their desk?" I add, improvising. "I'm not sure if Schmidt has such a calendar on his desk, but I see an opportunity to bluff." Susie doesn't answer, her eyes fall back to her hands. We can prove there was a third person in the room. Do you have evidence that someone else was in the room? Asks Vicky. First of all, we know that the camera was moved. The calendar and clock were set to adjust the time and date for the person taking the photographs. This again raises the question, why do you think my client would allow a third party to take photographs of him cheating? Or is it more likely that he was framed, as we have already proven with the affidavit? How do you know the camera wasn't on a tripod? Vicky asks, while Susie remains silent, looking at her hands. Bill explains how the photographs were enlarged and how the angle of the clock and calendar changed. He then takes out a folder of negatives from his briefcase and throws it on the table next to the other folders, inviting their experts to do their own research. I look at Susie now. She clenches her hands more intensely, her gaze seems distant. I'm not sure if she's even listening. Jake, you said you have evidence that you were poisoned, Susie suddenly asks, getting involved in the conversation again. Bill interjects, there's no direct evidence, lots of indirect ones, yes. We don't have a water bottle to test. We can't take Jake's blood test after all this time. But do you think these photographs were taken? Have you noticed that there's no evidence that Jake even had an intim with the woman in the photographs? Well, come on, Susie exclaims incredulously, standing up. I exclaim, see for yourself, Susie. Just look, without prejudice, at what you wanted to believe that I could do. It will be important for you to know that I woke up the next morning wearing trousers. Susie glances at me and then back at the photographs, shaking her head. She sits back down. Jake, everything you say indicates that this was a setup. Why did he go to such extremes? Susie, you already know that he forged the affidavit, and you know why. I've been telling you this for months. He went to such extremes for several reasons, and they don't even seem that crazy considering the goal. We were both fighting for the same partnership, a very lucrative partnership. One of us had to get it. There's a man behind it all, and you know it. You know this as well as I do. Another reason is that we just don't like each other, but I think his attitude goes beyond that and borders on envy and hatred. Nothing would make him happier than to really hurt me and rub my nose in it. But for this, he needed someone close to me to really hurt me. I watch all the color drain from Susie's face. I see that she is now fully aware of how much she was deceived. I wonder if she already understands that even if she didn't plunge the knife into my back, she helped turn it. Vicky asks if we have similar evidence of staged photographs. Bill pulls out a VHS tape that Bud created from various hotel security camera footage. Having received permission, he walks to the edge of her office and turns on the TV. After inserting the tape, he takes the remote control and returns to our side of the table. This is security footage from the floor where Jake's room was located the night the photos were taken, Bill explains. He presses the fast-forward button until the clock reads 1:23 a.m., rewinds a minute, and decides it's best to let the footage speak for itself. A few seconds later, we see the elevator doors open, and two people exit and walk down the hallway. They stop and use the key card to enter the room. He fast-forwards the recording again to 1:35 a.m. A few moments later, the same two exit the room and turn in the direction opposite to the camera, continuing down the corridor. They open another door labeled staircase and disappear. He rewinds the tape and plays the entire sequence again. That was Jake's room they went into, Bill adds quietly. It was the same night the photographs were taken. They were only in his room for 12 minutes. They were in his room at the time the photographs were taken. If you want, I can play the recording again, and you will see that they even knew about the security camera and were trying very hard to keep their faces out of view. Do you want me to play the recording again? Vicky looks at Susie, who is now fiddling with her hands more intensely. She seems to have lost even more of her complexion. Vicky looks at me again and shakes her head. We just have one more thing we want to show you, Bill explains. Again, he reaches into his briefcase and pulls out another folder. These are your copies, Bill says, handing over a folder containing two sets of enlarged images. He then rewinds the tape to 1:23 a.m., just as the elevator doors are opening. Do you see the chrome trash can in the bottom right corner? He asks. Neither of them says anything. This is important, Bill says firmly. This is more of an order than a request. Susie looks and stops fiddling with her hands. Yes, I see, she says lifelessly. Look at the first photo, Bill says, throwing the photo on the table. This is a still from that recording. They see that it is, in fact, the same as what is shown on the TV. Now, look at the second photo, he continues. This is an enlargement of the bottom right corner of the first photo. As I throw in the next photo, the image clearly shows the top round part of the chrome urn. Now look at the third photo, Bill says. I look across the table at the photo in front of Susie. The outlines of the urn are already lost, but the images in the reflection of the chrome become obvious. And finally, this is a close-up of the third photo, Bill adds. I glance again at the photo in front of Susie. It depicts two people in long coats. The smaller figure on the right has curly hair like Heidi. The one on the left is taller and is a man. As we saw last night, the zoom made the image grainy, but it's pretty clear to me who it is. The photo is not very clear, Vicky states. This may be difficult to use in court, but I don't think that's necessary, is it? It's enough for us that she has credibility in this room, and I think all four of us know exactly who it is. Susie looks down at her hands again. She seems to have passed out. Susie, I add, we even found the girl of easy virtue from these photographs. She won't sign the affidavit, but she will come here. She identified Schmidt as the man who paid her. She says she was told it was just a joke, and she'll also tell you that she thought I was drunk or something because I wasn't moving at all. She will also say that my pants remained on the entire time and that we could not have had a night. I hear Susie crying. Part of me remembers everything we had together and desperately wants to approach her, but another part remembers what she did recently and wants her to feel as much pain as I did. I realize Susie was right earlier. I lied to myself about not winning at any cost. But for now, I find that I'm still losing. We'll both lose. Vicky puts her hand on her shoulder and looks up at me. She says that her client needs some time and that they will get back to us. I'm a little annoyed by this. After everything I've been through, I want her to get on her knees and beg me to forgive her. I'm about to say something when I feel Bill's hand on mine. I look back at Susie and then at Vicky. Vicky whispers, please. I nod. Bill and I get up and head toward the exit. At the door, I stop and look around. Susie, I finally say. She looks up at me, eyes full of tears. I feel my heart being torn in different directions, and I change my mind about saying anything else. I shrug it off and leave without saying another word. The door clicks loudly as it closes behind me. Wednesday, 1 p.m. Bill and I are escorted to the same conference room in which I met with the audit committee on Monday. The same 5 members are present. I smile at Tom and Christy as I sit down and hold the chair for Bill. Shortly before the meeting, I spoke briefly with Tom Weston. He confirmed that he mentioned Heidi Hinckley's problem. Heidi did have an HR problem, and since Hinckley was the executive director of HR, it was her responsibility. He was surprised when I told him, only in general terms, about Hinckley's personal involvement. Tom was also able to confirm another point. He recalled that Schmidt bought that last round of drinks for 2 reasons. Firstly, because Schmidt spent so much time on it, and secondly, he noticed that the bottle of water on the tray did not have a cap. Christy clears her throat to begin the meeting. Sorry, Christy says. She stands up and extends her hand across the table. I assume we haven't been introduced, she says to Bill. You must be Christy Evans. Mr. Vickers has talked a lot about you. I'm Bill Banner. Mr. Vickers hired me as his lawyer. I see, she says solemnly. Mr. Vickers, Christy says formally. You of course know that you are not allowed to invite external representatives. I know I have a right to representation, I respond. Yes, but only internal representation. This is not a trial. We are required to follow HR policies that do not allow outside interference. I don't think it's possible to get impartial internal representation in this regard. I require an external representative. If you think otherwise, then I see no point in continuing this meeting. I get up, and Bill does the same. Christy looks first at Tom, who nods, and then at Hinckley, who shrugs. Mr. Vickers, Christy says dryly, I was appointed as a special consultant on this situation, and I was appointed by the partners to resolve this issue. Last night, an emergency meeting of all the company's partners, as well as members of this commission, was held. After much discussion, it was decided that your employment contract with the company is terminated. The severance offer made to you on Monday still stands, but only if you sign it now. In addition, you will be required to sign a document stating that you will not initiate any further civil proceedings against the company. I slowly sit down in my seat. Was this decided last night? I say, stammering. Nobody answers my question. I look to my left at Tom Weston, who is grimacing. I understand at a glance that he was in the minority at that meeting. I look straight ahead at Christy, whose eyes are slightly moist, doing her best to maintain her composure. This day is not going at all as I planned, I think. I feel empty inside, a sudden loss. I dedicated years to this company, only to be forced to leave due to made-up accusations by some scumbag. I look to my right and meet Schmidt's gaze. His smug grin is too much, or maybe just enough, to ignite the fire inside me. I look at Christy again. It was agreed on Monday that I should inform the commission of my response to the charges against me by noon today. The offer was a courtesy and was not binding, Christy replies guardedly. Optional, Bill says from my side. Mr. Banner, Christy says quickly, you have no status in this meeting, and I will have to ask you to be removed from the building if you fail to abstain. Oh, shut up, Bill says, surprising everyone in the room, including me. Damn it, now I remember why I didn't go into corporate law. Mr. Banner. Chris interrupts. You'll hear me now, Bill interrupts. Or you will hear me in court, and I can assure you that you will not like what you hear in court. Without waiting for an answer, Bill lays out all the original allegations and the evidence we've found over the past 2 days. I actually enjoy just sitting and watching. I especially enjoy watching Hinckley. She must have changed her complexion 5 or 6 times, from bleach white to bright red, when her personal involvement in this scam was discovered. I especially like the shade she took when Bill explained how she used information provided by Tom Weston to get Heidi to sign the original document. But the best part was when he described the hidden seal codes and badge data. Bill also emphasized that the emergency meeting held last night violated company policy in terminating my employment. He also pointed out that my termination was not only based on fictitious allegations but that senior management had violated criminal laws by creating false documents and that company resources had been used to commit crimes. So, Bill concludes, your original proposal is completely unacceptable. Then, under the parameters agreed upon at our meeting yesterday, I'm afraid we will have to withdraw our severance offer. Christy replies, great. Bill responds, your organization did my client a huge favor by withdrawing the offer. This opens the door for my client to not only file a civil lawsuit for wrongful termination but also opens up the possibility of criminal charges, not only against the organization, but also against specific executives. However, given that my client has dedicated a significant portion of his life to this organization and still has some feelings for it, he is willing to consider an offer that is at least 250% more than the severance package you offered and withdrew. In exchange, my client will agree not to file a civil lawsuit against the organization, which he will easily win. My client will also not provide any criminal information to the district attorney. In addition, my client will sign a non-disclosure and non-compete agreement. However, my client reserves the right to sue individuals for wrongdoing outside the company. Bill talked nonstop for 15 minutes or more. His sudden silence created a verbal vacuum in the room. Christy clears her throat. I need to present this to all the partners, she says. I'll give you until the end of the day tomorrow. It will take me a few days to prepare them, she counters. You held 2 emergency meetings within 48 hours. I'm confident you can organize 1 meeting in the next 36 hours. I will prepare our documents for filing in court tomorrow. If I don't get a satisfactory answer from you by the close of business tomorrow, we'll go to civil court on Friday 1st, Bill says firmly. How can I contact you? Asks Christy. Bill takes out a business card and passes it across the table. Christy smiles, takes the card, and then looks left at Hinckley and Schmidt. I need to see you both in my office right after this meeting. I'll start with you, Miss Hinckley. I have several meetings this morning. I can come to you during the day, Hinckley explains. Schmidt leans back nervously in his chair. No, says Christie. You can come with me to my office right now. If you need to cancel any appointments, my administrative assistant will do it for you. Christie looks to the right. Tom, could you please escort Mr. Vickers and Mr. Banner to the door? Tom nods, and the meeting breaks up. He laughs, telling me that the other managing partners will easily agree to a new package once they see all the chaos going on here. We exchange gratitude for the years spent as colleagues. He tells me to let him know where I will settle and not to be a stranger. Finally, he says he's not going to see me off. He assumes I know where the door is and isn't too worried about me stealing the printer or anything like that. We shake hands, and I see him quickly walking down the corridor, heading not to his office but to Christie's office. Bill and I laugh as we head for the door. So, you think you won? I hear behind me, walking past the empty meeting room. I turn around sharply and see Schmidt leaning against the door frame. Shouldn't you be taking your punishment in Christie's office now? I tease. To hell with this, he laughs. You know you'll get fired, I tease back. This fake evidence was good enough to be bad. So what? Dozens of other companies have jobs with better pay. Schmidt laughs and retreats into the conference room. I quickly start to follow him when Bill grabs my forearm. You don't want to do this, Jake, he warns. I have to do this, I say, and enter the conference room, closing the door behind me. I go straight to Schmidt. He stands a few inches taller, but that doesn't bother me now. You won't see any partnership, I say. In fact, you'll be lucky if you don't go to jail. I fall to my knees as pain explodes in my face. I did not expect or see the forearm that struck the bridge of my nose. Stunned, I hear him laugh. You've always been a damn weakling, Schmidt says. Damn weakling lawyer. I'm trying to clear my head and focus my vision. I'll admit one thing to you, he continues. You're a good damn lawyer, except for one thing, you don't see the big picture. At least not like I do. I'll kill you, I mutter. Schmidt laughs. See, Vickers, you proved me right. When you came in here and started talking about partnerships and evidence, do you really think this was all about the partnership? Of course, yes, brainworm, he mocks. This is everything you strived for. This is how to annoy me. He laughs again. See, you're still proving my point. It had almost nothing to do with any damn job. It had to do with your wife. Ever since I first saw her in college, I wondered what it would be like to have an intimate with her. I knew you would never appreciate such a gorgeous like she. I knew that somewhere inside her there was a prostitute just waiting to break free, and that I was the man who knew how to open her cage. Unfortunately, she didn't even look my way in college. But now, she's definitely giving me time. And you know what, Vickers? I was right, she is a first-class girl of easy virtue. He laughs. You piece of, I hiss, and my vision begins to return. You damn weakling, he growls. You don't understand, right? You lost. I've slept with your wife every night since Friday. You damn cuckold. You know she's begging me for more. She doesn't have enough. Just a few hours ago, I called her and told her I had lunch for her in my office. When she arrived, she locked the office door. It only took me a few short days to take your wife and make her mine. And you're the weakling who let me do this. I should do your wife a favor and just beat your sorry fifth place. My vision suddenly clears, and in a blinding rage, I snap out of my position, standing arrogantly above him. I tilt my head back and feel the back of my head slam into his nose. I lean back as far as possible and deliver the strongest blow right to his groin. A loud sigh and a scolding from Schmidt give me the opportunity to get to my feet. I don't hesitate, I knee him straight in the face as hard as I can. Even though his hand is covering his nose, his cry of pain only makes me smile. I allow myself instant gratification as Schmidt falls onto his back, one hand covering his nose, the other covering his groin. I just started ruining your life, I say. I want to break his face, but it takes all my effort to turn and head for the door. Bill looks at me with a raised eyebrow. You know how to make your lawyer's life interesting, he says. Are you okay? I felt better, I answer, gently touching the bridge of my nose, but not too bad, considering the circumstances. He smiles. Let's get out of here, he says. Something first, I say, and he groans. Seriously? I need to do this. Please follow me. I head very close to where the marketing department is. I go straight to Schmidt's office and am conflicted to discover that his administrative assistant is there. She watches me approach her desk with a look of concern and surprise on her face. Betty, I begin, I don't want to create problems for you. I just want to know one thing, was my wife here yesterday? She looks at me and sighs. I close my eyes in pain as I see her nod. Did she come into Schmidt's office? She nods again. And the door was locked? She nods again. Thank you, Betty. I appreciate your honesty. I look up at Bill. Come on, Bill, I say resignedly, now there's only one way to play this game. Thursday, 11 a.m. As Bill and I take our seats, it becomes apparent that the bombs Bill planted at yesterday's meeting have caused much collateral damage. Today's meeting is less crowded. Bill is my representative, and only Tom Weston and Christy Evans represent my old company. Where are the others? I ask. The HR audit committee has been dissolved since your employment has been settled, Jake, Christy says, much less formally than the previous day. We're just discussing the terms of your severance pay. I nod, realizing that Christy's weak smile hides much more than she expresses. Jake, Christy begins, after meeting with all the partners, your terms were accepted with the exception of the monetary part. They agreed to increase the amount to $3 million. I raise my eyebrows in surprise and look at Bill. This proposal is only 50% of the increase, Bill disputes. This is significantly less than the $5 million we require. Christy looks at Bill. This is our proposal, she says simply. Bill and I look at each other. We both shrug, and he takes a folder out of his briefcase. Bill hands the folder to Christy. We watch her open it. She couldn't hide the surprise that flashed across her face. What is this? She exclaims. Are you filing a claim for $10 million? This is double what you asked for yesterday. As I indicated yesterday, our position is non-negotiable, Bill explains. There are executives within the company who were part of the executive review process and falsified documents while on the job, using company resources. The entire dismissal process initiated by this firm against my client was a conspiracy involving some of the most senior members of this firm. And if that wasn't enough, my client was physically assaulted in this building by one of your senior executives. I am aware of the physical confrontation, Mr. Banner, Christy replies, once again taking on a formal tone. It's a matter of interpretation as to who attacked whom. Christy says again, with a faint smile in the corners of her eyes, as she looks at my double bruises left by Schmidt's forearm on my nose. My client was just defending himself, Bill continues. In fact, he had to do it from his knees after being knocked down by your VP of Marketing, Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt acted in his own self-interest, Christy says. He was no longer an employee of the firm. About that, Bill answers, I assume that you don't have former employees participating in meetings of the HR audit committee, so Mr. Schmidt must have been an employee of the firm at the time of yesterday's meeting. Since Mr. Schmidt attacked my client immediately after the meeting, I see no other conclusion than to conclude that he was still an employee of the firm at the time of the attack. There is still a question of interpretation as to who attacked whom, Miss Evans, Bill counters. I personally witnessed Mr. Schmidt's attack on my client, he adds. I expect you to do nothing but support your client, Christy replies. I hope you are not accusing me, as a representative of the court, of inciting perjury. Besides, Bill adds, there is a second witness. Second witness? Christy asks in surprise. Bill gets up and opens the door. Betty Higgins, Schmidt's administrative assistant, with whom I spoke yesterday, enters the room looking very timid. Bill offers her a chair, and she gratefully accepts the offer. Mrs. Higgins, Bill addresses her. I just want to assure you that you are not under oath. I have a few questions and would appreciate honest answers. Betty nods. Were you standing next to me yesterday at the door of room 15C? Yes, she replies. Did you witness a confrontation between Mr. Vickers and your former boss, Mr. Schmidt? Bill continues. Betty hesitates and looks first at Tom, then at Christy. Mrs. Higgins, Bill says, I personally would appreciate it if you would tell the truth to the best of your recollection. There will be no negative consequences if you tell the truth. Christy sighs and then looks back at Bill. Yes, I saw it. Can you describe what you saw? Betty looks at me first, then at Christy, and finally back at Bill. I suppress a chuckle, because it's obvious to me that Bill had some influence on her. I have never known her to be so accommodating or helpful. Perhaps my opinion was somewhat biased, since I knew she had been reporting to this scoundrel. They, Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Vickers, started arguing, and then Mr. Schmidt just punched Mr. Vickers in the face, Betty says. Can you show me how? Bill interrupts her. Well, he used his forearm, like this, she says, taking her hand and imitating hitting Bill on the bridge of his nose. Thanks, Betty, Bill says. What happened then? Bill asks. Well, Mr. Vickers staggered. I mean, he didn't exactly fall, but he just went to his knees. I saw that he was stunned. Then Mr. Schmidt started saying something terrible about his wife. I mean, Mr. Vickers' wife. Then Mr. Schmidt said something about how he should beat Mr. Vickers. He didn't use those words exactly, there were a few curse words, but that's essentially what Mr. Schmidt said. What happened next? Bill pushes. Then Mr. Vickers somehow managed to hit him in the face with the back of his head. I didn't see him do it because he was still on one knee at the time. Mr. Schmidt stood over him and teased him about Mrs. Vickers. Mr. Vickers then punched him directly in the groin. Mr. Schmidt fell to one knee, and Mr. Vickers stood up. Mr. Schmidt was still threatening Mr. Vickers and swearing at him. Mr. Vickers then kneed him in the face. Mr. Vickers said something I couldn't hear and then turned to leave. That's when I turned and walked back to my desk. I didn't want anything to do with what happened in the room. Thank you, Betty, Bill says gently. When you got back to your desk, wasn't it Mr. Vickers and I who showed up just a few minutes later? Bill asks. Betty nods. I think yes, you both arrived shortly after I sat down at my desk. Did he ask you if his wife came into Mr. Schmidt's office around noon on Tuesday? Yes, she replies. I'm going to object to my own lawyer's line of questioning, Bill says with a smile when he tells Betty that those were all his questions. Bill turns to Christy. Is there anything you would like to ask her? Christy looks at Tom, then back at Bill, and shakes her head. She then thanks Betty and tells her that she can return to her duties. Then, to my surprise, my lawyer gives a very brief explanation of what happened at my house on Friday night and the hospitalization over the weekend. Christy and Tom are shocked. Christy, being the lawyer I trained, recovers quickly enough to argue that what happened at my home was irrelevant because it was a private matter and had nothing to do with the company. Bill claims that SCH and Hinckley conspired against me, using company resources to discredit me and commit criminal acts, and that they corrupted the HR process to fire me. In addition, Mr. Schmidt, the day before, admitted in front of witnesses that he did all of this by using company resources and procedures to gain intimate control over Mr. Vickers' wife. Thus, what happened on Friday evening, even if it was in my private home, was simply a continuation of the criminal and civil violations that originated within the walls of this company. Bill then adds his opinion that any judge would accept this argument and allow the jury to hear all the evidence. Finally, Bill asks Christy how she thinks this will all play out in the court of public opinion. Christy then looks at Tom and asks us to excuse her and Mr. Weston for a 10-minute break. Out in the hallway, Bill asks, "Do you think they'll agree?" "I don't see where they have a choice," Bill answers. "They know that if the case goes to court, the newspapers will pick it up. This is not the type of advertising that such a company needs. I don't think they'll agree to the full $10 million, though." After about 15 minutes, they both return to the room with gloomy faces. Christy looks at me. "Jake, the maximum I can offer you is $6 million. This is the maximum they are willing to do, and they also want you to sign a permanent non-disclosure agreement and a 2-year non-compete agreement as you suggested." I look at Bill and smile. All we really wanted was $5 million, and I personally didn't care about the non-compete clause. I nod at Christy and smile, extending my hand to her, accepting the offer. After a few words between Christy and Bill, who needed to get together to clarify the details, Bill and I leave the meeting room and head to the elevators. "Mr. Vickers," I hear behind me. Bill and I both turn to see Betty Higgins nervously rubbing her hands together. "Betty?" I ask. "Did something happen?" "Well," says Betty, "yes and no." "What happened, Betty?" "Is this about yesterday, when you asked me if Mrs. Vickers came into Mr. Schmidt's office?" My suddenly angry expression causes Betty to take a step back. Bill takes a small step toward her and says, "Go on, Mrs. Higgins. What did you want to say?" "Well," Betty says, unsure how to continue, "I wasn't surprised that you asked me these questions, Mr. Vickers, but there was one question that I was surprised you didn't ask." I look at her in bewilderment. "You didn't ask me how long Mrs. Vickers was in his office yesterday." "She did lock the door, like I said, but she was only there for about a minute, maybe two. And when she came out, she looked very angry." I look at Bill, and he looks at me. "Thank you for saying that, Betty. Sorry if I scared you," I say. "Is there anything else you would like to tell us?" "No, Mr. Vickers," Betty says. "Well, yes. I'm sorry that all this happened to you." "Thank you, Betty. I appreciate it," I say, and Bill and I watch as she turns and walks away. "And what?" Bill asks. "What?" I ask in response. "Yesterday, when you found out that she came into his office, I saw how you finally gave up, and it seemed that your heart was completely hardened against her. It is now obvious that nothing happened in the office yesterday, at least nothing intimacy. Does this change anything?" Bill asks. I look at Bill for a long time, then say, "Absolutely nothing, Bill. Absolutely nothing." When I heard these recordings from Tuesday, it was all over for me. I just haven't realized it yet. Just at that moment, the elevator bell rang, and the doors smoothly opened. Bill and I walked in, and I watched as the doors closed for the last time on yet another aspect of my life. Thursday, 16:30. Once again, Bill and I are invited to my wife's office, this time at their request. Although, to be honest, we would still have asked for another meeting. It's time to end this once and for all. I immediately notice that Susie looks much better than the day before, although she still has difficulty looking me in the eye. After we sit down, Vicky says, "Jake, Susie has withdrawn her divorce suit." She admits. Vicky interrupts, placing her hand on Susie's arm. "Jake," Susie says, struggling with herself but still looking into my eyes. "We have a lot to discuss. I need to tell you something that will be difficult. I made serious mistakes in this whole story. I want to ask you for forgiveness. I need you to come home." I take a deep breath. There's no easy way to say this, Susie. I can't do this anymore. I doubt I'll ever be able to forgive you, and I definitely won't be able to return home. Vicky is shocked, but I notice that Susie seems to have been expecting my answer. "We filed for divorce," Bill says, pausing and handing them copies of the lawsuit and the proposed agreement. The agreement is straightforward. All assets brought into the marriage by both parties remain theirs. All assets acquired during the marriage will be divided equally. There will be no lump sum payments or alimony. We understand that under Texas law, Mrs. Vickers is entitled to 50% of all joint assets, but we believe that there are special circumstances in this case that require a special settlement. It would not be in the interests of both parties if all the events of the last week were aired in court. "Jake, what happened?" Vicky asks in shock. Susie puts her hand on Vicky's arm to silence her. "I understand that Susie still hasn't told her lawyer what she did with Schmidt," I say with a venomous tone. "Obviously, your client didn't tell you what she did, so let me give you a quick summary." I glance at Susie, and she lowers her head again, looking at her hands. "When I returned home last Friday, after almost 2 weeks away and the day before our anniversary, my wife cooked the dinner and we can enjoy food. Then my wife had a night with my worst enemy just inches from my face." Vicky looks at me, then at her client, and back at me, her mouth seemingly frozen open. "I woke up in the hospital over the weekend, alone, and they told me I was lucky because the doctors were able to save one of mine. They told me I only had a 50% chance of saving the other one. Oh my God, I hear Susie say. I ignore her, focusing on her lawyer. As soon as I was released from the hospital, I was served with a temporary restraining order that my wife filed against me at my own residence. I discovered that all of our money had been taken from our accounts, and my credit cards had been reported stolen. The next day, I was served with divorce papers and informed that the company where I work wants to fire me. Over the next 2 days, I collected enough evidence to completely destroy all the false and fabricated charges that were brought against me. This week has been terrible. If nothing else had happened, I would still have liked to try to save our marriage. Unfortunately, this is not the case. On Tuesday, the 4 of us met and were able to present enough evidence within 24 hours to cast doubt on the authenticity of both the affidavit and the photographs. I understand that none of you could admit it, but I know it's as good as you that there were doubts in your minds. Despite these doubts, I found out that my wife left this office on Tuesday evening, met my worst enemy, and had an intimate with him in my bed, in my house, like she's been doing for the past few days. I first found out about this on Tuesday night. All these mornings this week, when I tried to convince my wife that all these accusations were false, she just laughed at me. I look at Bill and nod. Bill reached into his trusty briefcase and pulled out a tape. This is a copy, he says. This is a recording of Schmidt's phone call from my bedroom on Tuesday night. I'll let you both listen to it in your free time, but the gist is that Schmidt plans to give you some good night this weekend. Of course, if you still want it, then I think you can call him. I look at Susie. Tears flow down her cheeks for the first time in all the time that I knew her. These tears do not evoke any feelings in me. I sigh. I've done enough damage for today. Bill and I should have left then, but I couldn't leave things as they were. I have 2 more things I want to tell you, Susie. First, you need to get tested. Schmidt has everything that moves. Second, I will always love you, but I can't be with you anymore. I don't know who you are now. I don't understand how you could so easily believe that I was cheating on you. I don't understand how you could betray me the way you did. I don't understand how you could continue dating Schmidt, even when I should have suspected that I might not have cheated on you. Was there really so much desire for revenge in your heart? A few nights ago, I sat in my hotel room, thinking about all the questions I needed to find answers to. There are still a lot of questions left, but I don't care about the answers anymore. I think I finally understand the old saying, the one that says, before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. Susie, you buried us both. I shift the gear selector to park and turn off the ignition. The quiet background noise of the radio and engine fades into the darkness, giving way to the silence of the car. I glance at her. She sits, a little nervous, in the passenger seat. We haven't said a word since she got into my car. I'm seriously wondering if I should have taken this trip to a little hill overlooking Austin. I remember how quickly the last 6 months have flown by. It was a journey to hell and back on the heartbreak train. My first decision was to break away from everything I knew in Dallas and move back to Austin to the University of Texas. I knew that all the details of Susie and I breaking up would eventually leak out to the world, gossip-hungry lawyers circling Dallas. I couldn't survive this shame. Just like in the old Wild West, I had to leave town. At the University of Texas, they were happy to have me as an end-of-semester guest lecturer. Austin wasn't far enough away to avoid the gossip that came from Dallas, but the more liberal atmosphere of the academy was more lenient than anything I could encounter up north. Just last week, the dean of the law school offered me a permanent position, which I gladly accepted. I was very proud of the way Christy took on my role at my old firm. I think I taught her well, and it was nice to see her blossom on her own. Because of how well my mentorship with Christy went, the idea of teaching full-time became appealing to me, and I was ready for a change. I think teaching would be a more enjoyable job. I don't think I'll miss the corporate world. I have no financial difficulties. When we divorced, Susie and I divided our joint property equally. But since the house was mine before marriage, I retained full ownership because I brought that value into the marriage. In addition, Susie refused any share of my severance package from the old firm. At the time, I would have fought her for every penny, so I was surprised she didn't fight for part of the $6 million. Now, 6 months later, I find that most of my anger towards Susie has gone away. Our divorce proceeded slowly through the Texas court system. Susie did not dispute the financial part of the divorce, but she did dispute the divorce itself. She wanted us to go through counseling and was able to convince the judge assigned to us to agree to it. However, Bill managed to ensure that the counseling was limited to just 6 hours. Since I moved to Austin, the logistics of attending counseling became confusing, as someone had to travel through our lawyers. We finally agreed on 3 monthly sessions of 2 hours each. The first 2 were in Dallas with a consultant of her choice, and the third and final session was here in Austin with the consultant I chose. Susie was not very happy about the separation of consultations, but she did not have much choice. The judge did not specify how the consultants were to be selected, only that the 6 required hours must be completed and reported to the court. She knew as well as I did that if she had contested it, the judge would have found a 2-to-1 ratio in her favor, more than fair. I couldn't have predicted the outcome of the first 2 sessions better. The consultant was a woman, and the entire 4 hours were spent narrating. I sat and listened quietly to how women have been suppressed since childhood, how this early domination of their spirit leads to sudden outbreaks in life, many revolutions, so to speak. I could hardly contain my laughter when the consultant tried to justify Susie's behavior. It wasn't so much a counseling session as it was a rationalization. After both sessions in Dallas, Susie tried to persuade me to stay after the session, even asking me to stay with her after moving to Austin. I quickly put my old home on the market and was pleased with how quickly it sold for the price I wanted. Both times, Susie offered to stay. I politely declined, and that evening, without any further conversation, I set off on the long drive back to Austin. This evening was the third and final consultation. I knew Susie would have a hard time finding the counselor's office, so I agreed to meet her at the LBJ library and give her a ride. Susie looked dejected and resigned when I picked her up at the library. The farce of the first 2 consultations was exposed as nothing more than attempts to justify her behavior and get me to forgive her and begin reconciliation. I almost laughed at her surprise when she saw that I had chosen a female consultant. She had no idea how difficult this night would be, but in the end, I was more surprised than Susie by how the session turned out. This was the last session on the consultant's schedule, starting at 7 p.m. It was only supposed to last 2 hours, and then I would be free to complete the last requirement before the divorce. We left the consultant's office just after 10 p.m. I had already met with the consultant before tonight. I met with her regularly, and she was already familiar with the situation from my point of view. She also knew all about the first 2 consulting farces, although the word farce is mine, not hers. I realized that something had changed decisively 5 minutes into the session. My counselor told Susie that she would know everything about our relationship when she went back to college to introduce herself. She told Susie that she had heard my side of the story and now wanted to hear Susie's. She wasted no time asking questions. Unlike previous consultations, and to my surprise, Susie made no attempt to defend herself or her actions. She didn't shy away from any question. At some point, I got the impression that Susie realized it was all over and that there was no longer any reason to hide her emotions. I watched in amazement as my stubborn, controlling, soon-to-be ex-wife surrendered to my counselor. We all learned a lot over the next 3+ hours. In all the time I've known Susie, she's never had a father in her life. Early in our relationship, I realized that this was a sensitive and taboo topic. I accepted her feelings and never discussed these issues with her. It was also obvious that although she loved her mother, she had little respect for her and had virtually no relationship with her. It was clear to even a fool like me that Susie had matured early and learned to take control of her life. I learned how her father controlled her mother, how he threatened to date other women if she didn't do him an intimate favor. Susie watched as her mother submitted to his requests, even when those requests required her to sleep with other men. Her father also didn't keep his promises not to cheat. Late at night, Susie heard the voices of other women in the house, along with her mother's crying. She heard her father tell her mother that she was being punished for not doing what he asked. I had to think about Susie's childhood when I heard her say that she remembers looking out the back of the station wagon as her house disappeared, hoping she would never see it again. How harsh must a child's childhood be for them to never want to see their own home again? Susie made a promise to herself to never let anyone hurt her or her mother again. She didn't date much in high school, even though she was considered attractive. Few people asked her out. Susie couldn't stand any of her rare boyfriends, even talking to another girl. Bill was her first serious boyfriend. He was a road builder. He stopped her while she was waiting for a construction vehicle. Her car was first in line, and he began a casual conversation with her. She didn't know why, but she was immediately attracted to his stern appearance, his unshaven face, even his dusty, dirty clothes. She refused to give him her number but agreed to take his. A week later, she called him after being stopped at another construction site. She remembered how excited and trembling she was when she called him late that evening. They only talked for a few minutes before he asked her to go to a bar with him the next night. She agreed, and he hung up, telling her where to meet him. She recalled spending several hours deciding what to wear. She was shaking as she parked outside the bar. She made her way into the bar without any problems and found him laughing with several other guys at a table. He saw her and motioned for her to join them. She suddenly realized that they didn't even know each other's names. He bought her a couple of drinks while he and the other men talked to her and asked her questions. After she finished her second drink, she felt a little woozy. He asked if she needed some air. Grateful, she agreed, and before she knew what was happening, she was already in his car, parked on a country road. She remembered how shocked she had been when he told her to please him. She refused. She remembers the look of contempt on his face. He started the car and then asked her what she was doing there with him if she wasn't there for a night. Susie said he had an intimate with her 3 times that night before driving her back to the bar and dropping her off at her car. Susie said that began a long string of nights, 3 or 4 times a week, when she would sneak out of the house to meet him. She knew he was married, although he didn't wear a ring. There was very little conversation. At the end of the summer, she told him she was going to college. That night, he forced her to kneel and give him pleasure. She said no, but when she looked into his eyes, she realized that this time, he wouldn't take no for an answer. He asked her if it was that bad, and she said she didn't like it. He drove her back to her car, and she returned home. That was the last night she saw him. He stopped calling her after several refusals on her part. She says she dated occasionally during her freshman year at the University of Texas, but nothing serious, no more than a few dates. Susie fell silent for a moment and turned away from me. Quietly, she said that she remembered Tim Schmidt, who persistently sought dates with her, but she always refused him. Her occasional dates changed when she met Bill. She immediately realized that he was different from the other guys in college. He seemed more mature and less obsessed with his masculine image. He was sensitive and funny. He looked straight into her eyes when they spoke, and she knew he understood her even before she said anything. They dated for several years and were close for most of that time. The consultant asked Susie if she had ever given Bill a. Susie shook her head. I remember looking at my consultant in surprise, but she didn't even pay attention to me. Susie continued her story and told how they got engaged during their senior year and rejoiced when they were both accepted into law school. It all ended the day Susie saw Bill with his sister, mistakenly thinking Bill's sister was his latest girlfriend. Susie immediately broke off her engagement and relationship with Bill. She didn't give him a single chance to explain himself, rejecting all attempts to contact her. It was almost a year before I appeared on the law school scene. Both Bill and Susie were in my class. I knew there was something between them, but since I graduated from Southern Methodist University, I wasn't aware of their history and didn't pay attention to the rumors. At first, we were just acquaintances. We gradually became friends and eventually started dating. All this time, she did not meet with anyone else. Our relationship didn't get serious until our senior year of law school. After graduation, we both decided to move to Dallas and live together. 2 years later, we got married. The consultant asked Susie at length about her summer relationship with the road worker. I listened carefully but still didn't understand what she saw in him. It was obvious he was a jerk from the start. He treated her with contempt. My counselor also asked a lot about our marriage and ultimately about what happened at the end of our marriage when she started dating that man Schmidt. She pointed out how we had both failed in our marital responsibilities, putting together a picture of what Susie had told her that evening and what I had told her in previous consultations. During the discussion, several things became clear that even someone like me could finally understand. Susie, for all her tough exterior, was deeply filled with uncertainty and vulnerability. She never gave herself completely, always leaving herself the opportunity to retreat in case she was offended. She expected to be betrayed and hurt. In her mind, it was only a matter of time. I could understand all of this, but even by the end of the session, I still didn't understand why she contacted Schmidt. Okay, I could understand Night for revenge for what she thought happened between Heidi and me, but Schmidt? He was a disgusting idiot, and she didn't need my opinion to understand that and humiliate me the way she did. I probably learned more about Susie in that counseling session than in all the years of our marriage. I'm a little afraid of what this might say about the kind of husband I was to her, but in any case, just like that first night in the hotel after being set up by Schmidt and Susie, I still had more questions than answers. When we finally left my counselor's office, Susie did one thing that literally threw me off guard. This single action made me reconsider everything I had been thinking about for the past 6 months. She asked my consultant if she could come to her appointment alone. Once outside, I immediately asked her how she planned to cope with these long trips from Dallas to my consultant. She looked right at me and said she was already planning to move here to Austin. I asked her if she was doing this because she wanted to continue trying to reconcile. She looked away before answering, saying that she understood I would never forgive her. She continued, explaining that she understood one of the reasons why I left Dallas so quickly after the whole story came out. She was more or less forced to resign from her position as an assistant district attorney and took the only position available to her, as a public defender. She said she didn't like that side of the law at all and that the stigma of what happened still haunts her in every circle, both professional and social. I asked if she had a job. She replied that she had used all her contacts and thought she could get a support position in the state attorney general's office. I asked if she had a place to stay for the night. She said she planned to return tonight. I shrugged and mentioned that she had lost an extra 90 minutes and that the drive was long. She said she didn't take a change of clothes with her. I shrugged again and said that was a weak excuse. She said, maybe so, and then asked me what I wanted to say. I paused for a moment, and she turned to look at me. I told her I was probably asking if she wanted to crash on my couch. She smiled and said she appreciated the offer and would accept it. On the way to LBJ to pick up her car, we first stopped at Starbucks, and then somehow, I agreed to drive up to this climb. Now I look at Susie, who is calmly gazing out the windshield. I've always liked the view of the campus from here. Susie finally says, I hum in agreement. A lot has been said today, she says, looking at me. Yes, a lot. I learned a lot. Me too, she says, pausing for a moment. Your consultant is much better than the one I chose. She then asks, is there anything you would like to ask me? I look at her. There were a million things I wanted to know, but I wasn't sure if I should even touch this Pandora's box, let alone open it. She sighs. If there's something you want to know, now is the time to ask. God knows you deserve an answer or two. I sigh, look at her, and then out the window. Finally, I say, why? That's a very vague question, she replies softly. At first, it was revenge, she says after several long minutes. I was so incredibly angry. And the funny thing is, I didn't understand why I was so angry. Over the last year, our marriage had already started to fall apart because we were both more passionate about our careers than each other. When I thought you cheated, I should have just left. I didn't understand why I was so angry until I came to the consultation today. I would like to blame everything on Schmidt, but I would be lying to both you and myself. Only today did I realize that Schmidt reminded me of that road worker. When he called me the day you were flying home, I had no idea why he insisted that it was important and related to you. I agreed to cut the meeting late in the evening and meet him in his car near our house. He showed me the affidavit. I immediately got angry. No, I was furious. He asked me what I was going to do. I said that I don't know, but one thing is for sure, I'm not going to sleep with you anymore. I remember looking out the window, trying not to cry. Oh, God, Jake. I was so angry. I remember the look on Schmidt's face. I remember the look on your face when I took your flowers and kissed you. I remember how angry you were when you realized that Schmidt was there, and I fed my rage from yours. The more you got angry, the more I enjoyed my anger towards you. And then I dealt you a terrible blow, Jake. I understand if you could never forgive me. Susie starts to cry. I'm so sorry, Jake, she repeats. I take a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she's just said. Okay, I understand this moment of revenge, even if it was wrong. And I understand. I can even understand how you got involved with him, especially knowing that he set up the whole damn thing. But I don't understand why you continued to date him. You had an intim with him while I was in the hospital. You slept with him even when the evidence of my alleged affair started to fall apart. Why? The first night, it was just revenge. But for the rest, I have no excuses. I don't fully understand myself. I didn't even want to take you to the hospital. I was just going to throw you out of the house and hope that you died on the street. But Schmidt got a little worried when you didn't regain consciousness and insisted that we take you to the hospital. I didn't care at that moment, but I agreed. Even after we took you to the hospital, I was still too angry to worry about you. We returned home, and he had me all night. I remember finally falling asleep from exhaustion. The next morning, I woke up with him between my legs. He had this look in his eye that made me want to be his prostitute for the rest of the day. The day passed in a blur. I was trapped in this world, so angry at you that I became his. I remember we took a break in the middle of the day, and I wondered if I should call the hospital. He told me he had a friend in the police who was checking on you because he thought you might become aggressive. He said that you had already left the hospital and checked into a hotel downtown. Until our last meeting a few days later, I didn't know that everything he told me was a lie. Anyway, when he told me you had left the hospital, I started thinking about our bills. It was easier to transfer money and cancel your cards. It wasn't difficult for me to get a temporary restraining order, even on a Saturday. He said he would take care of serving it, so I let him do it. She interrupts me. Let me finish. You asked why I'm trying to tell you this. I'm trying to tell you everything, even if it's something you probably don't want to know. She trails off, lost in thought. I knew it was over between us, she continues. I knew I would never listen to your excuses again, even though I think I listened to them every day, didn't I? I knew there was nothing salvageable from our marriage. I knew I would never forgive you, and on top of everything, this bad guy appeared. Today, I realized that Schmidt reminded me of that road worker. All this time, I knew he only wanted one thing, and by satisfying him, I also angered you. But I wanted something beyond that. I wanted something risque. He was a bad guy, and he made me want to be a bad girl. I leaned back in my seat, feeling the rage I felt 6 months ago rising from the depths of my being, like bile. I want to scream at her. I count to 10, then to 20. Several minutes of silence pass. Can I ask you a few more questions? I finally say. She looks up at me again, expectancy on her face. When Schmidt called you his office for lunch, what happened? Susie turns to me and suddenly starts laughing. I look at her in surprise. Sorry, you'll have to excuse me for laughing, she says, but that was the only good thing that happened that week. After a few moments, she stops laughing and sighs heavily. By then, I knew that Schmidt had set me up. I hadn't admitted it to you yet because I didn't know how to apologize. How could I apologize after what I did to you? I admit it, I wondered what he could want. I knew it wasn't dinner. Of course, he knew that his little facade was crumbling as quickly as our marriage. So, I went to him. I stopped at the table, and his assistant told me I could come right in. When I entered Schmidt's office, he was standing at his desk. He smiled at me. I almost laughed, but instead, I just smiled and locked the door behind me. When I walked up to Schmidt, he was smiling just as big as I was. I really wish I was wearing heels, the pointy toes would have been nice. Unfortunately, my shoe came off when I hit him in the groin, so I guess he didn't get the full impact. I still remember the look on his face as he slowly dropped to his knees. I hobbled over to where my shoe had gone and put it back on as Schmidt fell to the floor. Then I went back to him, leaned over, and whispered to him never to call me again. Then I unlocked the door and walked out. Susie stifles another laugh. Sorry, I guess I shouldn't laugh at something like that. If this has anything to do with Schmidt, please laugh, I say. I pause for a moment before continuing. You just mentioned that you already knew he was setting you up when he called you into the office. You were always so cold and adamant when Bill and I were dating, you and Vicky. When did you start to suspect that you had been deceived? Susie looks straight through the front window. Jake, that morning when we met on Wednesday, you actually destroyed all those beliefs I desperately held on to. Admitting to myself that I had been deceived meant admitting that everything I did wasn't revenge, but a crime. My weak claim to righteousness was that everything I did was in retaliation, as if there was a really good reason. When you took this away from me, what was left for me? Suddenly, I was the one who cheated. I ruined my marriage. I was an easy girl. I was no better than one of my fathers, or worse, just like my mother. But you forced me. By Wednesday, I could no longer deny the truth my psyche had been clinging to. But to answer your question, I began to seriously doubt the evidence on Tuesday. Even earlier, I discovered Schmidt's first lie on Monday. That morning, one of the police lieutenants caught me in my office almost immediately after you left. He had a partially completed police report of your assault, as recorded at the hospital. The police investigating the report from the hospital quickly realized that your wife was one of the assistant district attorneys and quietly related to the lieutenant. He asked me what to do with the police report. I asked him if you provided any information indicating that a crime had been committed. He replied, no. I told him not to worry about it and to forget about it. I gave him the police report back, but not before noticing that it mentioned that you left the hospital on Sunday. Schmidt told me you checked out Saturday morning. Despite all your protests of innocence, on Monday morning, it was the first domino to fall that broke my resolve. Okay, so if you already had serious doubts on Tuesday morning, how could you meet him on Tuesday night? I asked with annoyance. There was a heavy silence in the car. I knew you'd ask that question sooner or later, she says. I don't have a good answer for you, Jake, or at least not one that would reassure you. I told you before that I knew our marriage was over, but by Tuesday evening, I knew our marriage was over, not because of what you did, but because of what I did. I knew nothing else mattered. So why was I with him on Tuesday night? Because, Jake, I wanted it. Not with him specifically, but with anyone who would force me to do something decadent. In the end, I no longer had a marriage to stop me. I look away from her face and look out the windshield. I thought about asking her if she was still looking for ways to satisfy the need for decadence, but I decided that wasn't what I wanted to know. After a few moments of silence, Susie asks, "Can I ask you a question?" I turn to her. Of course, but I can't guarantee I'll answer. What happened to Schmidt? I stare at her. What makes you think I know anything about this idiot? Because I know you, she replies. I know you won't let him get away with what he did, just like you didn't let me. I smile and look out the windshield again. One of the benefits of having a lot of spare cash is that it's actually free. Let's say, hypothetically, someone with a lot of spare cash hires a private detective to follow the creep. And let's say every time this creep is trying to find a job, someone in HR is getting inside information, letting him know that the creep is really a creep. So the last I heard, this creep was trying to find a job somewhere, but so far, it hasn't happened. Finally, let's say the man has run out of all his spare funds and is now selling things to survive. I see, Susie says. And hypothetically, how long will the private investigator keep an eye on what the scumbag is doing? I shrug. Hypothetically, I don't know, but there's a lot of free funds. What about us? Susie asks. Us? I repeat. I mean, do you ever see an opportunity for us to be together again? I turn to her after hearing her unspoken question. If you're asking if we can ever make up, the answer is no. It took me 6 months just to sit in this car and have a calm conversation with you. I know, she says. I'm not asking for reconciliation, but do you see the possibility that we could someday become friends? Could be, I reply, looking back at the road and turning the key in the ignition. Someday is a very long time, Susie. For today, let's be content to be polite to each other. Tomorrow is a new day, and who knows what awaits us. I think it's your idea to continue meeting with a consultant. Someday you'll meet someone who will make you feel special again. I shift the gear selector to drive and release the brake pedal. What do you think of our concluding part of the story? In my opinion, this part was quite interesting and not usual in understanding what was going on, but at the same time it was very attractive to listen to. What is your impression? Write in the comments. Until new videos.